Thanks, Bob. Good evening, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order. Members present this evening is, to my left, Emmanuel Daskalakis, Michael King, Mike Baptiste. To my right, we have consulting engineer Charles Rowley, associate member Richard Swenson, town planner, what's his name, Ken Berkland, and George Barrett serving as chair. That's for the folks at home writing the minutes. First item of business is meeting minutes. I don't have a copy of those. I don't know if anyone else has. I think she emailed them, but I'm not.
She did.
So we'll pass on that. Next item is Aspen Dental, minor modification request for phase site plan and performance bond.
They were not prepared for the performance bond. A little background on this, I guess, is necessary. Charles Rowley had gone out to the site to do a site review update on the construction, and noticed that the work being done on the site was different than what was shown on the plans. Apparently, they are doing a phased approach to the construction, only doing enough to support the Aspen Dental. But as you know, in the site plan review that was approved by the board, there were 3 buildings on the site. At this time, they'd like to present a phased plan, a phase 1 approach, and have a performance bond for the remainder of the site improvements within the development. But they weren't prepared as yet for the performance bond.
Performance.
The estimate for the cost. They just submitted it this afternoon. I haven't had a chance to get it to Charlie for review.
Why would they be submitting a bond? It's private property.
It's private property, but it functions as appropriately with the improvements that are made.
I can understand why you'd want to have some surety there, but should the town be the holder of that surety? How could they go in and finish it?
Good point.
Well, I understand you want to be able to execute it, and I thought in the site plan that they planned to construct all the ways and parking lot, not necessarily all the building, but all the public ways would be. Is that a wrong thing to understand?
They were proposing not to complete all of the parking lots and all the ways on the plan. And they made an adjustment in one of the areas that was to be basically left as a grass strip, so to speak, until a later plan was submitted for the 3rd building. And the way this came about was when I first went there at the request of the site superintendent, I inquired as to the plans that they were using just to be sure that he and I were on the same page with plans. The plan sheets were different, and there was a section of the plan that was not the same as this one. So I came in and I spoke with Ken to be sure that I had the correct set. The dates on the plans that I had were the same as what were mentioned in your special permit. However, they were only going to put in 2 of the parking areas, and then they were going to make a perimeter road around the rest of the Aspen Dental piece without putting in any of the accompanying parking spaces that were shown on the site plan. So that left me the question, well, who's going to be responsible for the balance of that work? And that's where the idea of putting security in place came in, to be sure that somebody in the future is responsible for that work. There may be adjustments to it based on discussion that we had and the potential for an application to the Board of Appeals for a different use than what you've approved in your special permit, but that has yet to be decided. That wasn't a part of our discussion that we had, only that I had a suggestion for what they could do with a portion of the driveways to be paved, that they should check it with the fire department to be sure that they were okay, and then to come in with a cost estimate for that work that they were not going to do on this first phase. Because your special permit doesn't recognize phases at all. It's just as a blanket special permit for the entire site. That's where this all started.
So we have the plan that shows the phase one improvements, set of improvements that are proposed, and can compare it against the approved site plan, and notice there's substantial differences between them.
Is it the fact that they don't have tenants for the other two buildings, that they're
That's
kind
correct.
of short time,
Don't have the tenants and don't have the,
don't have the cash to complete the infrastructure?
right.
It's a very expensive lake out there.
I don't like it, I do that just for you.
Are they here tonight to talk to us?
No, they're not.
Can we move on?
Excuse me?
Can we move on to the next
No.
item?
We're not gonna be able to act on this, are we?
No. But if you want, we'll proceed with the analysis of the estimate for the performance bond for the remaining improvements. Wait to see what happens with the Board of Appeals in the review of the variance they're proceeding to request.
Well, I think at this
You're all
particular
set.
time, we need to decide if this is a minor modification.
I wouldn't call it minor. I would not call it minor. This is a pretty big departure from what we approved.
It's not totally a departure in that it's the same plan. It's just a matter of what are they doing now as opposed to what will they be doing later. They did make one adjustment in the location of some riprap, which in my view is minor. It's not a significant thing. If the use of one of the buildings is different and requires a different kind of circulation, which you have yet to see, then I can see where that would be probably a major modification. But that wasn't anything that we discussed in detail at our staff meeting.
Excuse me, but if they are asking for some revision, shouldn't they be here to answer questions?
Well, apparently they're not ready with the cost estimate for what the construction would be that they don't want to do now, and that's the reason why they've asked
So
to hold it up.
we wait for them to complete their...
Are they,
I just wanted a feeling of whether you consider this major or minor. Well, at this point, they're just asking to phase the construction.
I think it warrants a definitely look at versus just giving them a rubber stamp on it.
So far, it's just an oral description of a physical, visual element. How can we judge?
yeah,
Well, we do have some
We do have a
plans.
plan that's submitted for the phase one set of improvements.
I think the most important thing for me is to understand what the interim steps are gonna look like. I mean, if they wanna open the Aspen Dental building and have traffic there and people walking in and out, I wanna know what's it gonna look like on the other sides. I wanna hear some details about that phasing. I don't want an empty hole in the ground.
Yeah, rock construction on either side.
Exactly, and I think that we need to see that level of detail. And my second question, are they stuck right now?
No. No. Because there's infrastructure they're putting in. They're putting in drainage in the ground that is pertinent to Aspen Dental. So they're not stopped because of this.
Okay,
They're continuing to work. But I think it would be appropriate to discuss not only the construction estimate that they bring in, but also where they propose to stop the construction and hold off on the other phase or phases, whichever they decide to do, until they make a presentation as to what they want and how it's sort of connected together.
so they can come to the next meeting and Ken, I guess you'll share with them the concerns that this board talked to tonight and what we want to see?
Yes.
All righty. The next issue is an approval not required plan for map 109, lots A1 through 35 Rosebrook Place, A.D. Makepeace Company.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Rich Cirque, and to my right, Surveyor Bob Buckley from Beals and Thomas. Jim Kane wanted to be here tonight, but he had a conflicting meeting.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to set the stage for you before our discussion, the 8.5 by 11 staple documents that I gave you show you the sequence of plans that brought us here tonight. The first plan showing Lot A was the plan that was endorsed at the time that the special permit approval and site plan approval was granted by the zoning board. The second sheet shows the plan that was endorsed by the board after Lot A on the first sheet was subdivided into Lot B, which contains the Marriott, and Lot A1. And the plan that's before you tonight is the third plan, which would divide A1 into A2 and A3. A2 would contain the apartment building, and A3 contains the 99 restaurant, the Five Guys Burgers and Fries back to Saga Fusion, and the Cape Cod Bank and I-Center. So that's the sequence of plans that brings us here tonight.
And Lot A3 surrounds the other,
Pardon me?
Lot A3 surrounds the other parcels, the other lots.
Yeah. So it comes in
That-
here and
that's-
then runs down this way.
Yeah, but that's not a street, is it? What is it?
No,
Or is it-
that's correct.
It-
That's
it-
correct.
It actually is right
That's
here.
correct. There's this, A3 surrounds the other parcels
Why it's
because of
not
the
noted.
little strip that goes along Route 195. That's correct, Mr. Barrett. The purpose of the plan is simply to cleanly and clearly allocate property, taxes, and other costs among the multiple uses on the site. It makes it easier from an administration point of view to allocate costs when the various uses are on their own parcels.
To be clear, the only thing that we're doing on this map is drawing one line between cutting A.
can't hear you either.
We're drawing one line.
Correct.
Cutting A1 into two halves, A2 and A3.
That's correct, Mr. Swenson.
Mr. Cirque, what constitutes access for Lot B? It's not called out. Am I missing it?
Lot B, the access is via its own frontage on top of Lot A2. If you're looking at,
On Rosebrook Way.
Yeah, it's just not the little road that goes, that runs between the apartment building and the retail places, just isn't noted on the,
It's not noted, but that goes to the motel, though. They use that for a primary access. If I was going to that motel, I'm going across behind Saga Fusion, 99, and boom, and it goes right into the motel parking lot. They don't
there
use-
are easements that allow A2 to be accessed not only through its frontage, but through a connector drive south of Lot A2. And there is on record a trust which covers the entire site, Lot A, which is the first sheet. There's an easement that grants to a trust, the purpose of which is to enforce all of the conditions and the provisions and the terms of the special permit and site plan approval that were granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Question.
Yeah.
On Lot A2, it calls it out as a 5-story retail building and a 4-story retail building in the front and in the rear. Shouldn't that be residential building?
Oh, yes, yes.
And what is the address for that building? Do you know offhand?
I'm sorry?
Do you know the address? Is it the address for the residential building, address on Rosebrook Way or on
Isn't it 35?
Danbury Highway?
3 lots.
35. The-
35 Rosebrook Way?
35 Rosebrook Place.
Okay.
But you're right, Mr. Buckland, that that note should say,
There's the lot line, so you got
it's residential.
112 and 96 and 50, so you got the,
and that change will be made.
Sorry, I didn't catch it sooner.
we look for.
I'm sorry, I didn't either,
Zoning.
but I thank you for pointing it out.
Minimum frontage.
I don't see it listed anywhere.
Isn't there parking for the retail on their back, their service road for the motel?
There are amenities that serve the residential building that are off-site, and the same is true with respect to the hotel lot. There are cross easements that allow the maintenance of the infrastructure that serves each of these lots that go beyond the borders of those lots. That's why the master easement was created for the trust, and that's why the trust was created. The trust
State lot coverage
provides
on the plan.
that
Something you can determine.
the trust is established for purposes of the perpetual maintenance, administration, management, and regulation of Rosebrook Place, a mixed-use development built on Lot A on the first plan, pursuant to site plan approval, special permits, and variances granted by the Wareham Zoning Board of Appeals. As said decision may be modified from time to time. And
This frontage.
as you can imagine, in terms of allocating
So this lot
costs
here,
among a hotel, an apartment building, and three commercial uses on what would be Lot A-3, it becomes a lot easier if you can each have them on their own piece, at least to get their own tax bill.
no,
And
there's
this
there's
is a
parking back.
change of form rather than substance. Nothing will change on the ground.
So let me rephrase what I've heard, is that they're not doing any building, they're not doing any paving, they're just subdividing one big lot into two. The result is A2 is now dedicated solely to the apartment complex. A3 is now dedicated solely to the retail operation. The assessor's gonna love that. It's gonna make it a lot easier for them to assess value. It's gonna make it a lot easier for the owner to divvy up the cost appropriately on a better use case, if you will. I don't see any reason why we can't move forward on this.
How does it address frontage? How does Lot A2 get its frontage?
Frontage is on Rosebrook Way.
Yeah, but if I'm reading this right, it's 112 feet. Am I misreading?
No.
That's correct. And there also, Mr. King, is an obvious sideline deficiency. If you look at the northern sideline of the apartment building with respect to the line between it and Lot B. And the justification for well, first of all, the endorsement of an approval not required plan under the case law does not imply zoning conformity. And that's expressly noted in note 1 of this plan underneath the signature block on the left. It says, "This endorsement of the planning board should not be construed to be a determination of conformance with zoning regulations for all lots affected." If you look at the hotel lot, for example, or the town space suites, the Marriott, that has an obvious zoning nonconformity as well. And this is part of I would not be here but for the site plan approval and the special permit, which were granted by the zoning board back on or before 2011. And in fact, their decision is dated July 13, 2011. And if I can just read to you some sections of that decision. It says, if there are multiple owners of the site, petitioner may allocate responsibility among such owners by recorded instrument. That's in condition number 2. And condition number 13 states that the site is currently comprised of multiple lots that the petitioner may wish to consolidate or may separate into multiple parcels which may be owned by different parties. Whether or not such lots are consolidated into a single lot or shall remain so consolidated, the site shall be treated as a single lot for the purposes of compliance with the zoning bylaws and/or this decision. And condition number 12 of the zoning board decision states that the petitioner may petition the ZBA for amendments or modifications to this decision. The ZBA may grant requests for a modification for an amendment at the request of the petitioner as it deems appropriate and/or necessary to facilitate the completion of the project, provided the same do not derogate from the purposes and intent of the zoning bylaws and this decision. And then this language appears: minor modifications and/or amendments may be approved by the ZBA at any regularly scheduled informal public meeting, and we're going to be before the ZBA on Wednesday night for that purpose.
Well, I appreciate your comments.
Sure.
And maybe I'm just being thick-headed, but I'm still seeing a lot being created, and you're looking for an A&R, and it doesn't have frontage.
It has frontage, but it doesn't have the amount of frontage that's required by the zoning bylaw.
Right, and isn't that what we're acting on an A&R? Is it has to have,
I
one
think,
of the criteria is sufficient frontage?
I think,
It has frontage, and in the condition of an existing developed area where there are lot lines being put in between buildings,
Well,
the
that's,
case law has sided with the owner of the property, suggesting that they can go ahead with this.
so they can create a non-conforming lot.
Correct.
We should keep that in mind when we're,
This,
When we're
with
granting
all due
A&Rs.
respect to Mr. Serki, this is very confusing, so I share his
yeah,
question. Sure, go ahead, I mean, the thing is built and we want it to succeed, but what are we doing? I mean, my understanding has been that in order to endorse an A&R plan, there are two main requirements, frontage and access. Is it the ZBA that, Charlie, help me here.
The ZBA would be the party that would determine whether or not a deviation from a dimensional requirement is in fact justified.
But why are you here?
I'm here just in order to create a separate parcel to contain the apartment building, as opposed to one parcel, A1 on the second sheet, which contains 4 different buildings. On the second sheet, A2 and A3, I'm sorry, the second sheet, A1, contains what's called A2 and A3 on the third sheet. And it's basically 4 different buildings. And there's no problem with,
missing something.
there's no,
Missing.
You can proceed with an A&R under the Supreme Judicial Court in the case of RCA versus the City of Brockton. It was clearly stated that you could create a non-conforming lot.
So you could take one lot that you've already got approval for and create 2 non-conforming lots.
Correct.
So you're not
there's
creating
only
two,
one.
you're creating one.
There's only one lot is non-conforming and in terms of its frontage and its setbacks. I mean, the same point that you're making about the length of the frontage.
Well, I know what they're doing.
Couldn't that have very easily been corrected just by moving the lot line over a little bit?
They build it, get it approved, go to
And
Well-
then, and then
do
you
whatever they
come,
want.
right.
Split it all up.
If the lot line, if A2 were moved south, then you would be creating another nonconformity with respect to the northern line of Saga Fusion, and there's also a connector drive within Lot A-3, which would then have to be within Lot A-2. So it's really a matter of,
It would be clearer with the connecting roadways.
I mean, we have a right to use it, that there's no, by easement, just like we have a right to use the way to the north of the building. So there's plenty of instances on this plan in which lots have the right to use land on other lots for various purposes. And as Mr. Swenson said, there's no construction or work that's being contemplated here. This is just a paper change.
Charlie, do you have a question?
Yeah, I got some questions. I really have a concern over creating a lot with a building on it that would be in non-compliance with zoning. Looking at the definition of what an A&R is, and maybe this is where this particular court case differs from what the state statute says. But it says that in the state statute, when you're dividing a lot, it says such frontage shall be at least such distance as is then required by zoning or other ordinance or bylaw, if any, for the erection of a building on such lot. Now, maybe that is the difference between that court case and what state statute says, but in all my years of dealing with this sort of thing, when you did a division like that, you either got a variance from the Board of Appeals or you did the frontage in such a way that both of the lots where the division was taking place complied with zoning. The only difference when that did not occur was when both of the buildings were on the property prior to the adoption of subdivision control, in which case you could divide it just about anywhere you felt like.
Which isn't really the case.
But I have never run across a situation like this. I would love to see the case because it just flies in the face of what the language is, in my view, of the state statute. But I would also agree with George that it would be nice to see these driveways shown where they interconnect, or at least some sort of a reference to that document that was mentioned that indicates that those easements exist and those cross easements exist.
What,
Can I ask a question, Mr. Cirque?
Sure.
I have to come over there, just to hopefully put this whole thing to bed.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We have run into other instances in commercial applications, some of the shopping centers, same thing, have come in after the fact and created lot
We
lines.
got one pending over there on 28 and 36, same thing.
Sorry.
would that create a hardship? I mean, if you're just dividing that lot for administrative purposes, it's not a matter of it
Yeah.
creating an issue for some building that's gonna be built or infrastructure that's gonna be put in. That would settle the frontage issue for us.
Okay, I certainly would agree with you, Mr. King and Mr. Daskalakis, if it were not for the omnibus decision by the Zoning Board of Appeals. And the Zoning Board of Appeals envisioned in its decision that there would be multiple owners and there would be multiple lots. And as I said, we're supposed to be before them on Wednesday night to see if they will agree that what we're seeking to do is a minor modification.
Well, and I don't disagree with you
Yeah.
about having multiple owners and multiple lots. And I definitely understand the value of chopping it up for administrative
Yeah.
reasons. But I don't understand the reluctance in just changing that line to accommodate frontage, which every time that we've had someone come before us asking for an A&R, that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with access and frontage.
Frontage and area.
And the ZBA should be delighted with this suggestion.
Why don't I take it back to my
Thank you.
client
Yeah.
and we'll discuss it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be
Alright.
muchly appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Cirque.
And in the meantime, I want to well, we're not at a 21-day problem, but don't worry about it in terms of constructive approval. If you want me to sign something, I will.
They'd have to make a decision in 21 days.
Right,
'cause-
right. And so I want to make sure that by signing a waiver, you're not worried about that.
Yeah,
We're not close to that.
yeah, but the waiver won't do you any good, Rich. They've got to make a decision
Yes.
whether it's an A&R or not within 21 days, period. So there's no waiver to be granted. You can't get an extension on that.
Really?
Yeah,
I can't waive the 21-day period for approval?
no. You can withdraw it, right, Ken?
Withdrawal would be cleaner, or we
Why
can
don't I
deny.
withdraw it then without prejudice on the theory that, and if I come back with the line drawn as you suggest, that you'll waive the filing fee?
Of course.
Yes.
I don't know how the line was going to be drawn. Can somebody show it?
Just, not to belabor the point, but everything you read about your special permit talked about going back to the ZBA.
Yes, and we're going back to them on Wednesday.
Them enough?
No,
But this
no,
wouldn't be included in that?
because it then reduces this frontage
sorry?
from
So,
here to here.
But this
There's no
procedure
frontage
wouldn't be
there, that's
included
no
in that?
access. That's limited access.
Well, they would see what we're doing, because I need,
This is why they
I
put
need both
access in
boards. I
here.
need the zoning board to okay the change, and I
It starts
need
here.
this board
There's
to memorialize the
163
change
feet or
on a
something like
plan.
that between here and there. It doesn't work.
Was that your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this is no access. This is part of the state highway, limited access.
Mr. Cirque, I take it back.
What?
It doesn't work, Rich,
What?
to move that line, because if you'll note on the plan, Gills and Thomas has put access, State Highway Layout 8222. I suspect that's probably limited access. Or it may, in fact, be no access up to that point where the State Highway Layout stops. So if you move that line, you're reducing the frontage from roughly 163 feet on Lot A3 to something other than that.
So that first 60 feet can't be counted?
All that means is that's the distance around the curve. It has a radius of 25 feet and a length of
So if that's the
37
case, then none of
between
these
here and
have-
here.
None of these have access. This one here
Sorry.
is written as only 98 plus 56, that's 160, that's 112.
This one just makes it, this is the access for the motel. Right here. See this?
Wait, we need you, Charlie.
No, that one's 96.
If you can show that there is access there, that it's not either limited or no access,
So none of these
so that you
have
could
access.
add sufficient frontage to what you suggested, I would have no problem with it. But I'd have to see what the State Highway Layout says with respect to that.
For a reason.
Typically, they don't allow it.
Is that something that you could check?
This is,
Well, they could check it, they've got the layouts.
this is,
They could put the information on the plan.
Oh,
Well,
We have a
let's-
source.
if you look at it, knowing that, this lot's,
yes,
I didn't know if we were selling them or if we,
this lot's not conforming, and this lot's not conforming. None of them have 180 feet, even as they sit. This one did, until you put the line in it.
This one next. Right
Sure.
now,
Mhm.
because we got the builder out here.
They were beating a dead horse.
Yeah.
it will still be short.
Based on what you were saying, Charlie, that first 60 feet is not countable? Is that what you were saying?
I'm suggesting that by their notation as to access on the plan, the way that they labeled it,
Yep,
that means that access starts at that line
at lot, okay,
and not into the Route 28 layout from that point.
okay. So basically
does it go
then,
from the center of the radius?
No. No, it starts at the division line between the 60-foot dimension and the 66.57-foot dimension.
right, yeah, I see that.
Is that the edge of the layout?
Yeah.
So based on that information, then, all three of these lots don't have 180 feet.
So the only good
So
access we
holding their
have
feet
is
to the fire on this,
I think it's 150 feet.
150, I believe.
Oh,
We were
Isn't it
looking at
150?
Well, what, R60 for what, maybe, I'm sorry, looking at the wrong thing. What are we
Yeah, but
looking at?
we're in the commercial general zone. What's this commercial general require?
Just add these numbers up for me. Read them off to me.
60,
Yeah.
66,
Actually,
commercial.
96.45,
Yeah,
that's it.
and then we have this, 112.
Because it's family. Where are we missing it?
Counting 60,
Yeah, I am.
which you shouldn't, this is non-access.
No, this says
Maybe
no
we
access
could work on
into
this
here.
outside of the,
Assumption is it's no
any specific setbacks in the
Oh,
frontage and the B-dot?
Yeah, it's
Is that got
150.
a different set for B-dot?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Doesn't have it.
This one has just enough.
And this one is,
That one's got it.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's just the one they're proposing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like you can make it work.
Did you confirm it was 150?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can't take, I'm assuming that's why this hook is here, because of that. Yeah,
Okay, sorry.
66.57
You can go like we do everything else in town. Who's the client? The client's okay.
plus,
96.45?
what is the 340?
so are we splitting hairs?
It's
That
the
goes
snow
on.
line.
Hmm?
Here.
I said,
Here.
are we splitting hairs, obviously?
Are we being consistent? That's all I need to know.
But-
When do we do it one way, when do we do it another way?
Must include this.
Well, I'm with you that an A and R has always been frontage and area. It's a little different circumstance because it's basically it's one parcel that's being divided up into lease lines, but you also have the potential for changes in ownership and
Why don't
Yeah,
they
we're
feel
sure.
them as lease lines and not actual lots? If it's for internal, and we've done that. If it's for
Is what?
internal control, you do lease lines. That's what they do.
Yeah,
It's non-access. They have access here, so I don't,
unless different entities are going to, unless it's going to be conveyed,
precludes it from counting.
you know, that could be the purpose.
Yeah, because it did say separate owners, right? Different
Hmm.
owners.
Charlie, is it your position that the 60-foot section of no access precludes it being counted as frontage, even though the section just to the north of it clearly provides access?
Yes, I'm saying that, assuming that that's what the state highway layout says. And I'm assuming that because it was labeled that way, that the access to Lot A, whatever you want to call it, this entire complex, starts at the end of that 60-foot line.
Yeah, okay. And for that reason, you're saying that that 60 cannot count toward frontage?
Correct. Just the same as anything along this long line that's along Cranberry Highway can't be counted as frontage. I know that the other side of the highway, the state highway layout plan says no access.
Yeah,
I suspect it says the same thing on the northerly side, but
Yeah.
without looking at the plan, I can't confirm that it includes that 60-foot piece. I would assume that it does.
well, that's what it shows on this plan. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm assuming that the access begins at that sort of a Z-shaped line there.
yeah. And if you add the courses above it, 66.57 and,
96
So is the
Yeah, you-
question, does 100% of your frontage have to be access? Is that the question?
yeah,
It does for making it a compliant lot, yes. It's roughly 163 feet, those two dimensions added together. So you could take roughly 10 feet out, but you're still not gonna get 150 for Lot A2.
if you add the 66.57 and the next two courses, which are 96.45 and 112.66, you get 275.68, which would be less than 300.
Right.
Right, so you can't
The
come up
only,
with it.
the only other option, I don't know how the advertising was done for the ZBA on this, but are they modifying the special permit?
We're seeking a minor modification of
Oh,
the
okay.
special permit. That's what we're there,
All right,
we have an
so
appointment with.
it didn't include a potential variance then, right?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not.
All right.
On-
That's the other option you could seek for Lot A2, would be to seek a variance on the frontage.
We did, and we were trying to avoid the need for doing that by treating it as a minor modification and seeing whether the board could see fit to,
I don't think you could do that under the special permit. You could,
Right.
because of the conditions that I read.
I don't recall all of the details of the condition, but
Yeah.
you're creating lots under the subdivision control law, not under Chapter 40A with this plan.
Understood.
So I would think that under subdivision control, the Board of Appeals could issue a variance
Yes.
on the frontage.
Yeah,
You could note that on the plan, that they issued the variance on the frontage, and then the planning board could sign it with no issue, and you'd have the same
Yeah,
plan you have today.
and I understand that, and my preference, obviously, was to see whether they could accomplish that result
Yeah.
by means of a minor modification, only because I'm analogizing frontage to the other dimensional nonconformities that riddle this project.
I know, but that dealt with the entire property under the special permit,
Yeah,
which got adjusted from time to time. As I remember it, they had a maximum square footage for the buildings
yeah,
and a maximum area that was allotted to parking areas and so forth for the buildings.
right,
But it was as if it was one piece at that time.
right,
But this comes under chapter 41, not 40A,
yeah.
so I think you need to comply with 41. But I would defer, I made a note of that court case, and I certainly want to read it, because I don't want to give the board bum information.
Yeah,
Excuse me,
yeah,
Rich and Charlie.
yeah.
East of the Lot 3, Lot 3 shows two dimensions for length.
Yes,
One is 130.38, and the other is 310. I'm sorry, the other is 183.91. Even if you take this lesser one,
I'm not following you.
Lot A3
Yes,
On Rosebrook Way.
on Rosebrook Way
yes.
shows two lengths. for-
66.57 and 96.45, not including the 60 feet that's
No.
within the no access.
No, I'm sorry.
At the other end.
At the other end, at east of,
A3.
Oh, okay.
You got the small sheet there.
At the northern end?
Yep.
Yes,
there are two dimensions shown.
Small.
yes.
One is 130.38, the other is 183.91. What
I
are
don't
they?
see that.
I'm sorry, yes, okay, I was at the wrong part of A3. Yes, okay.
Now, does that count as access for Lot A3? Charlie, can you-
I'm not following you. I don't know where you're talking.
Okay, that's a good point. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, Charlie, you've got frontage of Lot A3
Okay,
of 130.38.
yep,
So if you take 130.38 and add it to the 66.57 and the,
Rich, we only need 24.3 feet to make Lot A2 150. Could we take it from that portion?
yeah, 130,
I'm not sure it doesn't have to be contiguous frontage.
It does
No,
have.
change the lot line. Change. What am I missing? I mean,
Can I get clarification, just to make sure I understand, Emmanuel? Are you saying that lot A3 is two separate pieces, the top one and the bottom one?
no,
Same lot.
sorry.
Look on the top, there's a little border goes all the way around.
Here.
Yes, it says lot A3.
But if this is frontage for Lot A3, it doesn't comply anyway. Could we reduce that by 24?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Push down through that line there.
But these two lots don't touch each other.
From here.
Oh my God, they do.
So now
it depends on how frontage is.
There's a bowling alley around the outside edge
24 feet
of
from
sidewalk.
here. They're not contiguous.
But the frontage isn't contiguous.
No, but if this
Yeah, I got it, man.
The question,
go over 24 feet,
Yeah.
then the problem goes away.
Oh, good Lord.
the question is whether the zoning bylaw requires frontage to be continuous.
Contiguous.
And I don't have the bylaw in front of me. Perhaps one of you do.
No, Rich,
I don't know.
Yes,
you move both legs. You move, take the 24 feet away
Holy
from.
Lord.
We can do it, right. He's seeing this, is just in this leg here,
Exactly.
because this belongs to the motel.
Put a hill,
That bowling alley was created when A1 was created.
Right.
Yes.
you put a slope and you measure up. the
Hockey puck could be adjusted.
Oh, so it's a walking path.
yeah, yeah.
There's a parking lot back there, too.
I haven't got the bylaw with me.
I don't either.
Does frontage have to be contiguous? Isn't that the question?
That's one of the questions.
I see.
At one point, it went to the center of the radius,
Yeah,
and then we
it-
fixed
It's
that.
just that Lot B is owned by another entity now.
That's for corner lots.
Oh, so that creates a brand new problem. Yeah, they're expecting, so if we say no,
Yeah,
gonna go to
the only complication we face is
Is
that
that their
Lot
next
B is
step?
owned by the Marriott.
They're gonna go there anyway.
so then why are we wasting our time?
We have to approve the,
You're talking about
So
drawing
it,
over here, right?
it's apparent we're not gonna resolve this tonight, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Under
to your point, George,
would need a deed
he's gonna
from-
withdraw the A and R,
them, yeah.
go to the zoning board and come back with what we decide over there, and find out if if the frontage has to be contiguous?
Or if the ZBA needs a variance to create a non-conforming.
Okay,
I
in
tell you,
any
I
event-
hate seeing these goofy
In
lines.
any event, we're withdrawing
But
the
it just
plan
doesn't-
before you
It doesn't
tonight,
conform to the
and
A and R.
would you like me to,
Yeah.
yep.
Dash off a quick note to that effect.
See, I'd just approve it and say, catch me later.
it'll bite you, it bites you in the butt later on.
Yeah.
We're known for setting precedences that weren't right.
Yeah, I could see what you're talking about, how that would come back to haunt you.
But A3 is here.
George, what we going on next?
I'm gonna jump to, other business, C, Sheridan Builders, because he's here waiting.
We just made A2. Then this becomes conforming, this becomes conforming, this becomes conforming.
This is in front of
The only problem that I have with what Emmanuel suggested, from a mechanical point of view, is that Lot B is owned by the Marriott. So we cannot, on our own, accomplish what he's seeking to accomplish. We would need a deed from them.
Your variance is looking better and better, isn't it?
Or you make that other driveway frontage,
Pardon me?
that other driveway that comes off of Rosebrook Way. It's not shown. You have another driveway that
Yeah,
comes in.
yeah.
You can roll that together.
This one's
I also want to look at the zoning bylaw to determine whether or not frontage needs to be continuous. That would have to be set forth in the definition of frontage.
We all set?
Ah. Thank you.
So the A and R is considered withdrawn?
Lot with
Access to the lot measured
frontage was
from
what?
one side lot line to the other.
That's no access.
Denied one up on, Charge Point, not Charge
The
Point.
the definition, just for the record, of frontage is the property line dividing a lot from a street, providing access to the lot, measured from one side lot line to the other.
I.e. contiguous. Is that what how you're interpreting that?
That's what it sounds like.
I'm finding it hard to conclude otherwise.
Well said.
We'll let you go do your homework, and we're moving on to the next thing, because we can be here all night on that one.
It's never easy.
massive.
How do you break
For the
those by
record,
roller?
the document I'm submitting to Ken says that ADM Maple Springs 2 LLC hereby withdraws without prejudice the A&R plan dated 11/11/19. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. I'll give her an interpretation.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time and your suggestion.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Rich.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a suggestion that we move down to the Sheridan Builders?
No, we can't do that. Yes, I had just said to Mike the same thing, so.
Okay, good.
We are gonna move him forward.
That's yours.
Guess we should have passed out the cookies first, they'd have been more agreeable.
Yeah, no, we might have passed that one. Pass them down, open them up.
It's red light food. I had a box yesterday.
Sorry, I'm on a diet.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe one.
Under any other business, we're going to go to item C, Sheridan Builders setting a bond amount for Spring Avenue. Thank you for your patience.
Matt Sheridan, president of Sheridan Home Builders.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of weeks ago, I was in and saw the board trying to establish a bond amount. The board graciously gave me 4 building permits, so we're able to continue working. And now tonight, I'm back in to hopefully establish a bond amount. That way the rest of the permits can get released. I did leave the last meeting quite perplexed, though, because I heard what everybody was saying with wanting me to bond all of the work within, around all the residences and the private driveway. And I left asking myself the same question. If I put up a cash bond, and God forbid I get hit by a bus tomorrow, and the bank takes over the project and sells the project, what happens to my bond? It's private property. The town can never step in and finish the landscaping or the paving on a driveway or private property. If I had a bond in place for the public section, the extension of Spring Ave, the town could certainly, at their own discretion, take that money and finish the public way if they so chose. But it's extremely unheard of for a town to step in onto private property owned by somebody else and essentially finish a project. And I guess that's still my biggest sticking point. I do have quotes to do the balance of the work within the private section, because I promised the board I'd be back with them, and I'm happy to give them to you guys. But I guess that's my biggest question still is, and I don't even want to sound, I don't know how to put this without, does the town actually have the authority to say, this is what we expect, when in reality, it's, the town could never actually cash in on that bond and finish the work? If somebody could answer that for me, I'd appreciate it.
The last I knew, I thought you were constructing all the stuff before the building permit, so I didn't even think we were gonna get to the point where a bond was necessary, so.
Well, I put the road in, and I did all the utility work, and the base coat is down on the road. So the last time I came in, I was seeking just to put a bond for the top coat on Spring Ave. And that's when a lot of questions came up about, well, how much to bond versus what shouldn't I bond? And that was kind of how it was left, is that the board wanted to see dollar figures for how much it would cost to pave the driveway and do all of the landscaping.
The site work is
I
all
don't-
done.
I don't
I don't
remember
remember
that.
having that discussion.
I thought the question was whether you put the road down before winter comes in, or bond it and finish it after you were building the houses in the spring. I don't remember the discussion about the rest of it.
Yeah, that's my recollection. It was just on the public way.
Because it was like $5,500, if I remember right, wasn't that the question?
Correct.
$5,500.
And
That wasn't enough.
No, that's what he proposed it was gonna cost, at which point I said, well, $5,500, you know, I wouldn't let that hold up.
I'm
building
really glad to hear that's the way you guys are recalling it, because that's definitely
permit. That's the way I
much
remember
better.
it.
Yeah, that's much better for me than the way
Have you looked
I
at this,
interpreted
Charlie?
it was left.
Yeah, as I recall the special permit, it says that all of the site work has to be done before you pull a building permit. That's what the terms were of the special permit.
Can you
And I think
define site
My
work?
point at that time was, if you want to modify the terms of the special permit, you can do that either by a minor modification or a major modification of the special permit that was issued. In the absence of that, where you've already released foundation approval, I believe it is appropriate that security be posted for the rest of the work that is required under the special permit. Now, if you choose to do that without going through the public hearing process, you could do it as a minor modification, but you could do it by a performance bond, which I believe could be from an insurance company. We've done that before, where the town is named as the recipient of the money in case something happens and it doesn't get completed. The town has the right to call that bond and to take the money and finish the work. It would be the same thing as if it was a private street. Doesn't matter whether it's a street or it's a part of the project. You can, as a matter of fact, I think in one section of the rules and regulations under site plan and landscaping, it says that you have the authority to require a bond for landscaping. But I think you've got a special permit. You don't have a subdivision in this case. You have a special permit. And as I remember the terms of the permit, it said no building permit shall be issued until the site work is complete, which you've allowed to
The correct
digress
wording-
from.
The correct wording is, no building permit shall be issued unless, A, all site work and off-site work is complete, or B, sufficient security is approved by the planning board and in place for all remaining improvements.
Okay.
The security shall be renewable for up to 2 years. If construction continues beyond 2 years, the planning board, at its sole discretion, may require a higher value of security to secure funds for completion of the work as well as repair of installed improvements.
To answer the question as to whether or not the town can do it, yeah, I think the town can. It has the authority to do that, and to take the money that is posted as security and get that work finished.
Have you done an inspection of the work on Spring Street?
Yes.
And that's, the binder is down?
The work's been done to date is fine.
The binder is down?
Binder's down.
Because I went by there after our last meeting and I didn't, I must have been looking at the wrong thing because I didn't.
I can tell you the date when I did the inspection.
Landscape grading, paving.
Did the inspection on 11/15. Found it appropriate, and they were going to do the paving that day.
Oh, okay, so I might have seen it before it was paved. So do you have your estimate?
They do.
Have you reviewed that,
Oh,
Charlie?
I haven't seen it yet. I don't know what it contains.
Thanks.
Well, I would say that that condition was volunteered by the applicant, not you, the previous.
Yeah, and I actually had a conversation with them about why they never agreed to that, and they felt as though they had made a mistake. Now I'm dealing with it.
So is this estimate from Robert B. Hour, is it, or just the work in, it's work for Spring Ave and the driveway?
Yeah, I had it broken up into two parts, just for the sake of the conversation. In the first part, obviously, they were extremely close to what the other contractor had quoted, within a few $100s.
Do you have the binder down on the driveway also?
Yes, sir.
It was all done at the same time, Joe.
And then the landscaping, it was priced out based off of the landscape plan that had been submitted to the board and approved.
So this work is done.
I don't see anything for loam and seed of the site itself. I see hydroseeding for areas already loaned by contractor on Spring Ave, but I don't see anything in there for,
I already installed the loom on Spring Ave. I didn't include the looming around the buildings or the plantings around the buildings. I based the proposal off of what the board had approved for the landscape plan.
okay, but anything that's disturbed on the site needs loam and seed. If it isn't under landscaping, it gets loam and seed for any disturbed surface, so that's a number that have to be done there.
I guess, again, that depends on how everybody interprets, if it's actually even practical to say you're not going to issue any permits until landscaping's complete, when the fact of the matter is the building inspector's never going to issue a certificate of occupancy if you give somebody a home that's just a dust bowl.
That's why you have the option, which is included in a special permit, that you can secure the rest of it while you get those permits.
I understand that, and I think I just go back to my original point of, if something ever happened to me, obviously a bank is going to step in and they're either going to finish the project themselves or they're going to sell the project. And I think it would almost be unheard of for the town to step in and pave a private driveway and do landscaping. Just even from a liability standpoint, why on earth would the town want to own that responsibility? Somebody falls and breaks their leg on private property, what does that do to the town?
Well, it's not just why would they want to do it, it's incentive for you to execute.
Completely understood. And I'm happy to work with you guys and figure it out. I said the last time, I'm happy if you want to hold certificate of occupancies. I'll bond the public, I'll bond the Spring Ave work, and then if you want to tell the building inspector, hold certificate of occupancies, I'm more than happy for that. It's going to be landscaped in April, as soon as we can
Yeah, 'cause
possibly
obviously you're
landscape.
not going to do any landscaping now.
No, that's it. We're done for the year in regards to all that. I think it just boils down to however you interpret the very loose wording and gray area, the way the special permit was written.
Well, like I said, that must have been something suggested by the previous owner, because that's not generally something that we would write,
I know.
So you're looking for a way to execute without the out-of-pocket expense?
No, I'm happy. I shouldn't say happy. I will incur some sort of expense. I'm just looking to keep it reasonable and come up with something that works for everybody. Enough incentive that you guys know, obviously, I'm going to finish, and at the same time, I can get the rest of the permits released and we can keep digging holes. That's why I was suggesting, even I'm happy with a bond and a note to the inspector that says we're holding COs. That's, in my opinion, more than enough incentive. I'm not having closings.
Do you have any pre-sales?
Yes, sir.
How many?
2 right now.
Out of 8?
Yes, sir.
Are they solid, or are they solid?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Yep, PNS, signed and ready to go. Delivery in the beginning of April.
Refresh my memory, last time we talked, the number on the table was $5,500, and didn't we say we felt that was low? Do I remember that correctly?
Well, I think you're talking, if you're saying the wear course on Spring Ave, he's got a price of 4,800. That's the only thing that's close to that.
Wouldn't it be the whole thing, though?
But what Mr. Swenson was talking about is I had another quote that, yes, it was for 5,500.
But that's represented by the 4,800 here, right?
Right, correct. I didn't bother
That was
bringing
pretty
in the
close.
other quote. Yeah, they're extremely comparable.
Yeah.
So you add the 500 for the hydro seeding as well.
I carried 500 for the hydro seeding on the Spring Ave section of the work under the landscaping quote.
Just as a point of reference, is the wording of this that say that that all the site work, on and off site work will be done before building permits are issued, is that as unusual to the rest of you as it is to me?
That's why I say it must have been offered by the initial applicant, because it is,
Let's go put in all the grass and then go put
Right.
up
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
go
okay.
dig holes. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just double checking myself
Yeah.
here, so.
Yeah.
Do we have the ability to set this bond amount at whatever this board feels is fair and just and appropriate? I mean, could we do it, my point is, could we do it for $1 if we felt like it?
Do we even need to go down that road? I mean, if we have the ability to hold certificates of occupancy, would that be
That's a-
sufficient incentive to do the work?
I think that's a little stronger than $10,000 or $20,000.
the, I don't know that we can hold a CO. I know in the past that's been a sticking point, that the CO is a function of the building permit, not a function of the site plan or special permit.
I just hate holding this project up for silly rules, if you will. I don't know what other word to use.
Well, it's not silly to say that we want Spring Avenue to be the town property, to be improved properly. So I would suggest taking the 4,800 plus the 500 for hydro seeding, add 50%, as we have often done on other bonds,
$7,500?
and say 7,500 for bond.
And your mic's off.
7,500 for a bond.
How much of the plantings are connected to to Spring Ave, do you?
None.
There's
It
no
was just
street
the plan that
trees-
was
No street
approved.
trees suggested or anything like that?
No, they're planted behind the lot line. They go along Spring Ave, but they're actually on not the town section of the lot line. They're outside the road layout.
Charlie, you think 75's sufficient?
It is for the paving of Spring Avenue.
Yeah, right.
Excuse me, in your PNS agreements with the buyers, is there a provision that final payment for the final purchase payment is not made until certain work is completed?
So typically what would happen is the buyer would do a walkthrough once everything is done, and it would actually be the bank that would want that holdback and the money be held in escrow
What is it,
until something is
10%?
done. The dollar figure could vary, like say it's the dead of winter and landscaping couldn't be complete, or if the AC condenser hadn't been installed yet because of the time of year. The appraiser, they would actually set a dollar figure and it'd be held in escrow. And then once the work is complete, the homeowner would sign off on it and the attorney would release the money. It's very, very common.
Wouldn't that be just for the building, though?
Correct.
Interior of the building, not the outside?
No, it could be the exterior too. If your landscaping isn't complete, or if you had, senior purchase and sales, you had an agreement for a patio or something, and you closed in February, and obviously it wasn't able to get complete, you can
That's-
certainly,
I think that's a condition between the developer and the homeowner. It doesn't have much to do with the planning board.
no, it's got nothing to do.
No, but
The
I'm
the
saying-
question was if the buyer could do some sort of holdback.
Trying to find a way to help move the project along and find
If you-
security.
The only thing I can suggest would be that if you feel that you don't want to ask for security on the site itself, and it doesn't get done, that your only option would be to then ask the building inspector to enforce the terms of the special permit. And that was all the site work had to be done before building permits were issued.
But landscaping couldn't be done before.
That's correct.
permit
So
being- that-
you could make an amendment to your special permit that allows that to take place. But in doing that, the building inspector is still the zoning enforcement officer, and he enforces the terms of the special permit. So you'd have to knock on his door and ask him to enforce the special permit by going to court or whatever to make sure that that work gets done.
And of course, that all
The
happens
way that
after the
the way that
fact.
the special permit is written right now, that's what you'd have to do.
We do have a 2-year landscape guarantee.
Yeah, but you know as well as I do, George, that things have happened and things just never get done, and now you're under the gun of not having any enforcement at all. I can sympathize with not doing it until the appropriate time. It doesn't make sense to put all the landscaping in and then dig a hole for a foundation. That's silly.
No.
So there must be something to accommodate Mr. Sheridan here to get him what he needs, but at the same time protect the town's interest to be sure that what's on the special permit plan is followed through and is completed. Even if you were to ask me to go out and do a site inspection after he says everything's done and I find that 2/3 of the plantings are there, what is your enforcement of that?
Right, yeah. What recourse do we have?
Excuse me?
What recourse do we have at that point?
That's my point. The only recourse left is for the zoning enforcement officer would be to go out there and serve a cease and desist on him for whatever and take him to court to get it done. And I don't think that anybody would necessarily want that.
This discussion follows from the way the special permit is written, correct?
Well, there are two things in there, that either all the site work is done prior to the building permits being issued, or the landscaping is secured.
I'm sorry. that
particular
you
case.
got into that because I don't think the town has any business on a private property. But if it's written like that,
If you increase the suggested number to 10,000 and not release it until complete.
I was just thinking that same thing, have a bond on the first half, and then when that's completed,
You have a bond to cover
roll it over to
the
the second half.
paving and that work, yet you have enough incentive there to do the landscaping. Because there will be a sign-off on the site plan, correct? On the special permit?
Yeah. I would encourage you to take a vote to that effect, though, and not just say, well, we'll allow the security for the road to be there and you hold it, because he would have every right to come in here and demand that you return it to him if you don't say something about a stipulation that it will be transferred to the landscaping.
Perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because obviously this is the wrong time of year to do landscaping and to hamstring them with that.
I think
I think
we're
that's
all
the-
in agreement.
I
How do
think
you want
that's
the
the
motion, George?
modification to make is,
To roll it over to the landscaping once the road's done?
Or to say
or
it's-
not release it at all until the project's complete.
It's for all the work.
That's what I mean.
It's all work on the site.
Can you live with that?
Perfectly fine. I think it's very reasonable.
We're reasonable people.
Yeah, get a
What's the
motion to that
next step?
effect?
We have to
Motion
vote
to,
on that?
what did you say? Joe?
Just before you do, you're happy with, what'd you say, $7,500?
I
10,
raised it to 10,000.
Raising it to 10?
I suggested that if somebody has a
Right.
different.
Well, you're leaving $6,000 on the table, just so you know. I'm sorry,
Yeah, leave more than that.
wrong one.
yeah.
Leaving 3,700 on the table.
How'd you get to that number?
That's the landscaping number.
13.7 is the landscaping number with a $10,000 bond on it, which I think is fine.
I think that's workable. I think we can live with that, just to see this project move. I make a motion that, we accept the surety for $10,000 and to be rolled over from the road to the project.
To the
I
landscaping.
I wasn't suggesting a rollover. I was suggesting not to be released until the project's complete.
Well, I guess that would have the same effect,
Same thing.
because the road would
No,
have to be
because
done.
otherwise he could go put the base coat on and look for his surety back. I mean, the wear coat.
Either way is fine.
Well, pick,
No, wait,
One.
what, I thought that after the road is complete, after the town mandated work is complete, then he transfers to the site, to the on-site site work, to the landscaping.
Or you can word it, we're doing a $10,000 bond on the whole thing, right, George?
6 of 1.
Yep.
Just. Which way would you like to word it?
I would say when the project's complete.
Bond to be
Guys,
released?
wait a minute, complete means there's a loose light fixture in the house.
It doesn't apply to what we're doing here.
But
That's
project-
between
It's
him and the
not a-
homeowner.
If there's a dead rhododendron tree, then it applies to us.
Exterior work.
Yeah.
Site work.
Okay, do you have your motion?
Second.
We gotta help Sonia out here.
Yeah, you have to do that.
Move that the applicant submit $10,000 bond for, not to, I think it's easier just to say not to be released until project complete.
Yep, that's it, that's good.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Do we need to vote that as a minor modification?
I don't think so, because it was an option in the special permit.
Very good,
Thank you.
thanks.
Good luck.
Back to preliminary business, item D, chapter 61, notice for map 105, lot 1002C, 1002D, 1002F, parcels C2 and C3. Notice to convert for residential use. Chapter 61 is, I guess, for all, the easiest explanation is the agricultural exemption, I guess.
That's correct.
And property owner is proposing,
Release of the chapter 61, which provides the town with a right of first refusal.
I think we
How's
should
how's
buy
the
it for
land,
playground.
how is it zoned now?
it's in agricultural.
R60, I believe.
R60, which is residential, right?
Correct.
I'm just trying to understand. I don't.
The zoning,
This is off of Charlotte Furnace Road.
It's on this side of the power lines. Before Millworks. Millworks is on the other side, this is on this side. Remember they came in here for modification, there was a little strip that they acquired in an auction or whatever, and they want to combine it all. Now they want to cut it up into 3 lots because they're all clear cut right now, waiting for foundations.
You know, on the, oh, this is in a different spot. It's not before the power lines, it's after the power lines. It's those strips.
Oh, that's that piece between Millworks and Beaton's,
There's
Bayside.
a couple pieces between Millwork and
Last time they were on this piece here, there was a question about that road. Remember there was a road in the middle?
yeah, that's what these are.
Access go to the solar. Millworks right here, and Bayside Agriculture's right here. Remember this big piece, it was cut up 3, 4 different ways, the solar farm's in the back. And they had changed this guy to get access to go in the back. And there was a question about this road, it showed up on all the other prints.
102
What are we being asked
C,
They wanted
102D, 1002D.
What they want is a release from the tax reduction that's available under Chapter 61 of a state law, 61A being the agricultural exemption.
But didn't they come back and eliminate some of these? Didn't they take those out of there?
They took this one out and the one by Millworks, this one is still there.
But they're asking for that to be released and that to be released. All of them. Convert
Yeah.
to residential use. You got commercial uses on both sides, I'm gonna put residential use in. No, that's the underlying zoning, so.
What lots are these, Michael?
This is what, okay, this is after the power line. You got Millworks, the power lines, Millworks, and
You
Bay,
got
Bay
two
State
lots, two empty
Agricultural's
lots.
way up. There was a piece in the middle there. One time, they had 3 parcels in there, or three lots. Somebody wanted to make a contractor's rental or whatever. Then there was a road in between them, then there was the other lot, and then Bayside. And there was an access lot to go to the back, to the solar farm piece, that's behind it.
Right, these are the lots between the ones on the road and the solar farm, right?
Yes. Solar farm's behind it.
You got Master Millworks,
Yep.
Right,
and then you have
These in
two
here.
large lots.
that's right.
You have 2 large lots between there and Bayside, and then you have 3 strips of land.
In the access to those are these strips?
No, the access is South Furnace Road. But they're proposing to, apparently the agricultural extension was still on the, exemption was still on those. And they're looking to release that, and they're seeking whether the town wants first refusal on the lot.
Yeah, I think it'd be good parking for the soccer field across the street. Tell them the town wants it.
You could have parking and a drive-in theater.
You're making a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah?
We put a leaning tower of pizza up there too?
No, just parking lot, because that playground up there is gonna be pretty active pretty soon.
So this is a good thing for the town in terms of tax revenue, right?
I'm kind of surprised it's still in agricultural since it was A&R'd. I thought it would have come out of there when it got divided.
They did a lot by
No,
lot.
they save it until they get a buyer.
You can do that? You can pick it off one at a time?
Some people can.
Part D, when I went to a planning board school, I didn't get this, I don't remember this. It says it's a notice of intent. Are they asking for something or just telling us?
They're notifying us that they plan to take out of agricultural exemption
Okay.
for residential use.
So
Under that procedure, the town has first right of refusal if they have a use for the property.
We can say, no, we want to buy it. We want to buy that land and keep it agricultural?
is it the planning board's decision?
No,
Doesn't have to keep it agricultural.
You do, right?
You don't.
You don't, but we can
got
buy it.
first right.
At fair market value.
Fair market value.
Don't buy any more properties?
We don't want any more property.
No, not
And make a
not
nice
like,
parking lot, I'm telling you.
So is there any reason not to do this?
make a nice growing field.
we're not
The
doing
reason not to
anything.
do it is because you don't want to purchase the land.
Because we do want to purchase?
You don't want to purchase, then you don't want to take the right of first refusal.
So we don't
Planning-
want to
planning board.
exercise that,
Right.
so that means we approve this.
No, we
Correct.
notify the selectmen that
Yes.
we have no
We have no concerns
no
or no
desires on
intent.
the property.
Yeah.
I'm sure they gotta get input from other boards also, or just us?
Well, we
No, they go to other boards as well.
So you
How
look-
does this fit in at all, if at all, with the master plan?
It doesn't get down to that level of detail.
Well, but he's got a
That's
good question.
Yeah, that is a good question.
Residential versus agricultural, that comes into master plan discussion?
Master plan has a strategy in there to maximize and maintain our agricultural properties that we have. Absolutely, that's in there. And the thing where I get a little fuzzy on it, in trying to answer your question is that the property's zoned residential right now. So, I mean, we're not switching it from to residential with, I'm not saying this right. It's residential property that they declared agricultural for tax reasons, and now they say we're done doing that.
You gotta remember, that was one big parcel.
Yeah.
If it were not in common ownership with a large agricultural pot, it wouldn't have the exemption.
So to keep answering Emmanuel's question, though, to satisfy that one aspect of the master plan that you asked about, the town would have to buy the land.
Well,
At fair market value.
given that property where it is, from a town standpoint or from a master plan standpoint, do you need that to execute the plans for across the street for Westfield? I would say you don't, because you still have
Sure.
plenty of acreage on the Westfield site that would not require this property. I don't see any immediate need myself.
And let's be real clear, I think I mentioned last meeting that the master plan is full of contradictions. You know, it's got open space and waterfront and maintaining agriculture, and at the same time, it's got industrial development and mixed zoning development and all kinds of things like that. It's really focused on the area, the land use map. Where do you want to focus your initiatives? Do you want to go focus open space in Wareham Village? No, you don't. You want to focus that in the appropriate areas per the land use map. And the vice versa is true as well, so.
Actually, I think, judging by the neighborhood and the public hearings we've had, they'd be happier with it being residential than,
Why do you say that? I'm just curious.
oh, it was quite heated. Master Millwick, things got quite heated about this industrial type use going on across the street from a residential area. So I think the neighborhood would be a lot happier with residential there than.
Makes
The
sense.
neighborhood's heard a lot of stories over the years. When the BDOT came, and I hate using them acronyms, the overlay district, they were looking at maybe putting high-tech buildings in there, something that would bring something to value to the town. And when that went down in flames, it seems like this particular proponent, whatever the market will bear, that land has changed 90,000 different uses, what the focus was gonna be. So the people finally caught up with it when Master Millworks come. They said, where's the high-tech buildings? You know, it's gonna be a manufacturing building, basically. And, you know, master plan talks about degradation of neighborhoods, and that's a good example with the overlay district. You know, you start putting stuff in there that, you know, all of a sudden you're living in your backyard, you got all nice trees, they're gone the next day. You got either solar farms, or you got some guy over there grinding on, you know, making something, you know, making noise.
Don't forget that it's still R60 zone.
Yes, because it was all one parcel.
Well, even though it wasn't.
Underlining zoning stays in
Yeah.
place.
Yeah. The only difference is that it had a designation as, for tax exemption for agricultural use.
Yeah. if
Or you
got-
could do it for forest management, you can do it for a number of things.
Right.
And from what Ken is saying, all they want to do is eliminate that restriction. They're going to have to pay back taxes for what, something like 5 years or something, the difference between what the tax relief was and what it would have been, so they have to pay that up. But then it gets it back to just ordinary zoning like it always has been. So
So it
it's not
stays-
changing any zoning at all.
So it stays R60.
Yeah, it's not changing anything.
Or it could, they could come in with a BDOD change and have it be more commercial. What they've said on paper is residential use. but-
Oh, yeah, it could be, sure.
Hey, I'm for it. I don't think it's a bad thing, whatever the market will bear. We need the tax revenue.
And that's the thing, it immediately becomes
It's
taxed as a buildable lot.
It's saleable, right, yeah. Yeah. Because, you know, if you're looking for a potential buyer, and then you're gonna tell them you're gonna go through this, get this released or whatever, you know, it creates a big problem. Because for it to stay in 61A with a private sale, it has to be over six acres, contiguous acres, in, be in the process of some kind of agriculture, whether you raise plants,
In
cranberries.
fact, it was attempted years ago to tax all the growers upland on, all their A and Rs as developable, and it failed, so.
Well, if you went to Carver, most of the mansions are all built on the bog sites. So it's under 61A as far as tax goes. That's why a lot of small towns get beat up with taxes. Down the Cape, you don't have that problem. On this side, we do. Rochester, Carver. Carver's the worst. I think Carver got more cranberry acreage than Wareham does. And it's tough.
So do we need a vote to give them our report, or simple report do?
Yeah, a motion could be that there's no action to be taken.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh, I got it over again.
Looks like it's gonna be a short presentation,
I'm sorry, what?
huh? Oh, it's coming up.
Is it my turn?
Thought we had a white screen and we were gonna
Yeah.
have a short presentation.
Turn the lights off. Where's the light switch?
Could you get one of the light switches, please?
Okay, master plan.
Very good, thanks.
Thanks.
Here's where we are. I have taken the source of the 2018 master plan and totally reconverted it into Word format without any of the, I made it very clean. I've made all the changes that we've discussed, and I can go through them. And I want to say, first of all, that most of the changes, the high percentage of the changes are taking out time frame things. There'll be statements in there like, do this by the end of 2018. And we're already almost into 2020. So any time references like that have been removed. Updated things like the soon-to-be-created redevelopment authority, that's been fixed. And we'll go through them all. There's two key changes we made, and that's where we took out a couple of the strategies, and we'll get to them. But I can go through this. I added a detailed table of contents, excuse me. I added a figure list of all the different charts. Revision history, the first rev of this was April 2018. The next rev will be whatever we come up with. So here's the changes. Anything in red's a change, underlined is an add, strike-through's a delete. The wiggly underlines is a word they don't understand, like John Cronin, he doesn't understand Cronin, so don't get confused. I added Michael and myself.
Did you scratch John's name?
I left it in there because he was there for the 2018 version. That was my thought. I'm happy to take it out if you want it to be the current.
Oh, no, that's fine. I didn't realize that he was here when you were going over that.
And
Well, you
you
were
notice I left Jasmine in, I left Scarsiotti in. We changed, in the introduction section, we changed nothing. This is all overview and history type of stuff. You know, there's no changes till page 17. This is all exactly how the 2018 version is. And then we get into land use. And over on the right over here these are the changes. The first one is as you can see, the soon-to-be-formed redevelopment authority is now the redevelopment authority. The implementation of the town's ongoing vacant survey is now the completed vacant survey. Took out a reference to do something by the end of 2023, just said do it. There's a map. Everything else is the same, no change. Here took out a reference to by 2021. Here took out a reference for by 2023. This was a change that we put in about the solar law. It used to read minimize visual and environmental impacts of solar farms by implementing town's recent solar bylaw, and we changed that to utilizing the solar bylaw because it isn't all in place now. Not really a change there to speak of. We did a lot of softening in our second session where there would be strategies that were called out as do this. We changed do this to consider this or promote this or support this rather than try to change the tone from a mandate to a, what's the right word to use? Suggestion, if maybe that's. Good example, strategy 2 here was expand chapter 43D expediting permitting. We changed the wording on that to promote it as appropriate. Strategy 3 we changed to partner with 80 Makepeace and other developers as opposed to focusing just on Makepeace and the BDOT. And I changed that here in the strategy section and in the text as well.
When you reference the BDOT though, you're pretty much locking in one developer, so you included and other developers, it should say and other areas for BDOT, right?
I thought that, is the BDOT just Makepeace or?
Pretty much. I mean, there's some transfers of ownership there now that have taken place, but they're still in the BDOT.
I want to change it to how you guys want it.
I think that's appropriate to say other developers. You have the opportunity for other developers to buy Makepeace property and develop as well.
All right, this is strategy 4. This is one that we talked about at great length in our first session. And this is a new strategy. This was about, the whole issue is that we have a lot of space for incubator and small startups in our industrial parks, but we don't have places for them to grow. You guys remember that conversation? So I added a new strategy, and this is all my wording here, but I'll just read it. It says, provide facility and infrastructure growth paths for expanding small and incubator businesses. And I just go on, while continuing to provide small business startup and incubation opportunities, Wareham needs to provide facilities and infrastructure for successful small businesses to expand as they grow. We have facilities for small and startup, but have recently experienced situations where these have outgrown their initial locations and were forced to move outside of Wareham. So, any comments, or does that sound about right?
Sounds nice and wonky, yeah.
Yeah, I'm good at wonky. Here's a continue to use and enhance online permitting.
Got a question in the back.
Sorry.
That's all right.
The idea is clear, but how can it be implemented? You know, it makes, I was trying to follow it as you were reading. Could you repeat the written statement you wrote?
I have my own personal thoughts.
No, yeah, what,
So I look up on Kendall Road, is it?
Kendrick.
Is it Kendrick Road, is that where Stone Path is? And we have lots and lots of very small locations in those rows, right? Then those are good for startup and incubator.
That's where I started.
That's where you started, but you wanted to grow, right?
Yep. I
And-
was forced out of town. I ended up going to Buzzards Bay to buy a building.
So as we develop new industrial
Forced out of
space,
town?
it has to be designed and developed with
It's true. You guys are
expansion
looking, yeah.
for the business owner in mind.
these properties are town-owned,
Not, well,
or are they privately owned?
Privately owned, but as a planning board, we can encourage and promote this. You need to come up with expandable footprints, if you will. Am I saying it right?
maybe it's time to look at developing another industrial park, you know? That might be
That's an option.
that's one way of executing that.
But to your point also, Emmanuel, I want to say the master plan isn't an implementation diagram or tool. It's outlining the goal. And once that goal is, people have grasped onto it to try to execute it, then they've got to figure out how to do it. There's online permitting. When this was originally written, we didn't have it, and we do now, so this is just changing the tense of it to continue to use and improve rather than to implement. Don't say anything, George.
Well, it's still a violation of the building code, but we'll leave it alone.
Oh, yeah, well, talk to me later about it.
Someday they'll merge together, but
In regard to working with Toby Hospital and to reinvigorate Wareham Village, we added in "and other local businesses" in there, not to make it more inclusive. This was on these changes here are about the library certification, because when this was written, we had not reattained our certification, so all the changes now are about maintaining it as opposed to getting recertified. Basically, just bringing it up to date. Here I took out of, they had a phrase in here, "as of the writing of this document, February 2018." I just took that out. This was about the community center. This here is a significant one. This is where there was a strategy to implement a Prop 2.5 override, and it has been totally removed. And then subsequently, the strategies behind it are renumbered. And then strategy here, this is the trash thing. The strategy was establish a pay-as-you-throw solid waste program, and our discussion was, let's not mandate what the technique's going to be. Let's encourage someone to take this on and come up with and explore different alternatives. And the wording now reads, explore alternative solid waste programs and strategies. And I keep pay-as-you-throw in there, but also talk to private contractors and material recovery facilities, basically saying, go look at alternative strategies and consider everything and anything rather than how it was written before where it just said, go do pay-as-you-throw. Everything else here is the same. Took out the word undertake and replaced it with encourage. Here took out the phrase during the growing season of 2019. Took out the phrase scheduled to begin in 2018. This was on the reconstruction of Cranberry Highway in East Wareham. This was on the safety program, pedestrian safety program, where it's been reworded to put it in the hands of the road commissioner, as opposed to the original suggestion of creating a new committee and separate committee. You guys remember that? So it's traffic and pedestrian safety program initiated by the Wareham Road Commission is how it reads now, giving them total ownership of this one. And we have the chairman of the road commission right here in our midst. You know that, right?
I see the excitement on his face.
Is that why Secret Service is here tonight?
There was a strategy here to create a bicycle and pedestrian plan, and it now reads to support the creation of such.
I get a kick out how well the white line is worn off of Onset.
Oops.
Bicycles going on.
This, instead of participate in the DOT Complete Streets, it now says evaluate the DOT Complete Streets program. Here's a change about the housing production plan, that it did expire in 2018. It was originally written that that expiration was coming up. That's HPP again. Then the task was update ZBA rules and regulations for comprehensive permits, and the comment was we don't have any rules around that, so it was changed to develop as opposed to update.
I'll have to correct that because there are rules and regulations for comprehensive permits.
So how should this read?
Update.
All right. I must have got,
Original wording is correct.
the original wording is correct. So housing goal 1, strategy 2. Housing goal 1, strategy 2 is okay. All right. I'm sorry, I must have heard that wrong. I'll fix that one as well too. Strategy 3, same thing.
No, it says ZBA adopts rules and regulations for comprehensive permits at a public hearing. And then you're struck by the end of 2018.
I'm
They're
sorry.
already far left hand, second bullet point.
Yeah, ZBA adopts rules and regulations for
You say adopt updated rules and regulations for comprehensive permits at a public hearing. After a public hearing.
So this should all be updates, right? All right.
How can the ZBA adopt it? The only thing that can adopt changes in the zoning is the town.
Under the state laws, zoning boards of appeals have the right to, under special permits, to adopt rules and regulations for the implementation of their processing of the comprehensive permit.
Rules and regs just have to go through a public hearing process, I thought.
Yes,
For
by the
planning-
board.
For
it's
the planning
adopted.
board.
And they have to be filed with the town clerk.
What is, just a question though, what is out there then, other than the zoning bylaw, that anybody would go by for a comprehensive permit?
The comprehensive permit rules and regulations are available in the planning office and at the town clerk, and they were all 40B developers that come
Okay.
forward.
All right.
All right, so here, took out a 2018 reference, took out a 2019 reference there, took out a 2018 reference and a 2023 reference, took out a 2018 reference. This is affordable housing requirements. I updated this with,
The latest bill.
yeah, and that's not even right. It should be 12/7/72, 12/73, and 12/74. And I have a version that has those, and I did them this afternoon. So those are the latest three she's done. And they'll sit in committee for the next 15 years too, probably, right? Open space, didn't change anything, took out a 2020 reference. Strategy one here in the agriculture space was pass a right to farm bylaw, and we changed that to evaluate if we should implement, to try to soften that a little bit. Took out a reference.
I think we changed it because we didn't know what that entailed. We didn't know what the repercussions were, so.
I'm getting close to the end. What was this? Oh, this was about reusing money. The EP, no, I'm sorry. The MVP program. This was all written to say we need to be MVP certified, and I believe that we have become MVP.
We already are.
So that's what all these changes are. And then repurpose funding from municipal vulnerability for the MVV program to implement ongoing new and resilience projects. This is where I was a little confused. So on strategy number 2 on the right side, it says, hey, there's some funding available from this MVP program, and the task was to go use that in a repurposing to implement ongoing and new resilience projects. And we talked about we shouldn't do that, but then I didn't know how to change it. In 2017, the town received $24,000 from the state MVP program to create a resiliency plan. However, many of the objectives of the MVP program were already achieved through the EPA Building Blocks Technical Assistance Program. Wareham should obtain permission to use the MVP funding to improve existing efforts and actively pursue new projects that prepare for climate change. And as I read that, I said that goal's probably fine as is. It doesn't say we have to. It says we should, try to do it, consider doing it, and so I kind of left it alone.
It makes sense because I think under that strategy, the strategy 2 that becomes strategy 1, it's not repurposing funding, it's taking funding from the municipal vulnerability program to implement ongoing and new resilience projects and infrastructure improvements.
So you think you were okay as it is?
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. You mentioned climate change.
Yes.
My antennas go up when I hear that word. What's the scope of this? What does it mean?
Whatever you need funding for.
I'm not questioning your efforts.
I understand.
What do you understand by that climate change?
The MVP program that Strategy 1 told us to try to go get certified for said if you can get that, you can get funding to put in place what they call resiliency programs. And that is programs to make Wareham more resilient to the effects of climate change. For example, seawalls or things like that. That would be a program.
Drainage or roads or bridges.
And so,
But is any of this based on science, is what I'm saying? We're talking about spending money, and quite frankly, I have serious, through my own research, serious reservations about the validity of these claims. So we're gonna be spending money, or that they're giving us the money just to play the game.
That's it. Join it, get in line with your hand out and play the game.
So how much money is there?
so therefore, I
Not a
thought,
lot.
I thought the repurposing the money might be a good idea, because
Can we?
that's what the goal says, go try to.
They want you to spend billions of dollars to move your infrastructure, and then for something that might happen every 50 years or so.
Change the word create to support. Let's see, change the word pursue to consider, again, just softening. Changed the, if this was, I added evaluate the need for regulated fertilizer and pesticide use near flowing water, as opposed to the original wording was more like go create more regulations. And that's it. It's pretty much.
Good job, Richard, thank you.
I think it just brings it, there's just a couple things around the Prop 2.5, and the other one, that's the big change to the whole tone of this thing. Everything else is basically just getting it up to date, in my opinion. So,
Something struck me, one of the conversations we had, I suggested we encourage the reuse of existing buildings. And I don't know where you put that in, or if it got put in, but we also have a comment that we're gonna have a demolition squad going around picking properties off. So
sure.
there seemed to be a little conflict there.
I don't remember the conversation about utilizing existing buildings, to be honest with you.
I did make that comment at some point.
Maybe I was ignoring you again.
Again, or still?
So, what my goal personally was tonight was to review with you all the changes that we made, emphasizing the fact that we really have done no more than just update the 2018 plan to make it current to 2019. And then ask for a motion to approve it and make it an official document. The implications of doing that are that we have to file it with the Housing Authority per state law. Other than that, we have an official master plan. And then to follow on top of that, the procedure that I shared with you a couple times about how we entertain suggested changes to the plan, I'd like to have a vote on that tonight as well, to say we adopt that, so that when people come to us and say, we don't like this particular sentence or this particular task or this particular area of the master plan, we can say, okay, fine, here's how you propose a change to that. We have that lined up and ready to go when we have people that think there's an issue that needs to be addressed, rather than just, put it out there and say, I don't know how we change it. So I thought that should be formal. I can bring that back up if for anyone wants to see it. And what this basically says is that where could a change come from? I say a planning board member, another Wareham Board Commission authority, et cetera, the director of planning, the town administrator, or a Wareham citizen. And what that all says, very simply, is anybody. Anybody can come forward with a change. And once that person's decided to do that, they come to this board, they present a summary of the change, what their motivation for doing it is, what they expect the benefits to be from doing that change, and then the official text that they want to see. And then we have, as the planning board and the owner of the master plan, we have three options. We can approve or reject it right there. We can approve it with some immediate modifications that we make at the time of the presentation in agreement with the presenter. Or we can say we need more input, and we can go to anywhere we want. We can go to the town administrator, the director of planning, another board. We can hold a public hearing. Then with modifications, the applicant can resubmit, and we can approve or reject it. It's pretty simple.
Now, past practice has been to do that on town meeting floor.
Not for the master plan.
Yes.
Past practice.
When did we ever have a master plan that was approved before?
We had one on file, it expired.
It's on file, but it's not approved, is my understanding.
Well, it was changed on town meeting floor. So that would, to me, infer that at some place along the line, it was approved somewhere.
So one of the things I didn't say is about, on the approval of the master plan itself, I've heard from Charlie at great length and other people as well about the desire to bring the master plan to town meeting. And I've talked to a lot of people about how to do that with different ways to do it. Do we take I had one person suggest we take all 52 strategies in as 52 different articles on the town warrant.
You can handle that.
Yeah, I'll handle that. That'll be great. I've talked about the 20 different goals, or the 7 different categories, or just a referendum vote, or that's not the right word. An acknowledgement vote that the planning board has approved it, and make people aware. Not sure how to do that yet, but
Well, one of the articles in town meeting, it's usually done by, what's the expedited thing, is to approve the reports of all towns, of all committees, boards, commissions. That could be encompass
but
the master plan.
I've come around to the thinking that we need to go to town meeting, and in some manner, shape, or form, I haven't figured out yet, say, we have a master plan, and the planning board's approved it, we want the town to know it, we want the town to acknowledge it, we want the town to, I don't know what, I shudder at the word approve it. 'Cause pardon me?
Adopt.
Adopt it, something. But we need to do that. Clearly we need to do that. But, to your point though, if this board feels that we need to take a change to town meeting, then so be it, but
Well, I just would like to know how you're gonna answer that. You know, if somebody comes up and said, this should be, you know, in the past, this has come to town meeting for a vote, now you're taking that away from town meeting, how do you respond to that?
the way I've responded to it in the past is that there's no requirement that it go to town meeting, and that the only obligation to do approval or changes is on the planning board, per Massachusetts state law. And I've talked to Bone about it, and Bone has shared this with the selectmen when they asked the very same question. But town meeting is how we govern this town, and it has weight. So we need to do that. But first step is this board's got to approve it. And this is, my wife said to me tonight, she goes, what's going to happen? And I said, people are going to be hesitant to sign on the line.
Just remove all references to climate change. And
Just keep in mind, and keep in mind, it is a wish list. It is guidance. It is not a bylaw. You've heard me say all these things. I'm pitching to Congress this week twice, and for that Congress to be successful, and it's sponsored by the planning board, is how I've postured it. I need an agenda for that Congress, and the agenda is the master plan. So,
My, my candid reaction is to do justice to all of your work. Shouldn't we have a final copy of that we should really pay attention to and go through? I mean, I confess, the last time I read the plan that, before you revised it, was a year and a half or two ago. I'm not up to speed on it. You've made, again, congratulations on the effort, acknowledged. But I see this guy is working so hard doing this thing, and in my mind, limited in its scope, I'm saying, what's the next step? And how do we benefit from this effort? And I think the two go together. My suggestion, at least my thought is, that each of us should really take the time now to do justice to your work and read the damn thing thoroughly. And I have a few peeves of my own, as you know, that I would want to plug into it and make sure that it accommodates them. And as one of us said some time ago, unfortunately, we have day jobs. And I mean, it's hard to, 80 pages, how many pages? But now that you've done this, speaking for myself, to do it justice, I gotta read it. And that's why I feel uncomfortable approving it, only because I would be just doing a courtesy move to
Sure.
approve it without.
And I understand and appreciate that. I mean, you can imagine how many times I've read it.
I'm sure.
Um,
Yeah. I mean,
But
does that upset you? I mean,
No,
there's no
it's-
reason to vote for it today.
no, it's hard. It's very hard. I mean, it's why I put together summaries so people can, it's 97 pages long.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I had it to do all over again, I'd figure out a way to make it 25 pages long. I've talked to other people, and actually I talked to a guy from Nashua, New Hampshire I used to work with, who was on a planning board up there, and I said, how big was your master plan? And he said it was over 200 pages. And I go, Jesus, how unwieldy is that? And he goes, it gets very unwieldy, but then again, it's such a high-level thing. So, it's hard to read. It's hard to, you can't sit down and read the whole thing. It's very difficult to do. And then my counter argument to you, Emmanuel, is that look at the 52 tasks on the 3.5-page summary. And if you can line up with those at a high level and not have major heartburn that's going to stop you from approving, then we should approve it and move forward. And we should have a tool that we can start using in a forward direction. I believe that the town and all the agencies in this town right now are very reactive. We don't have enough people working on the tasks that have to be done. And this planning board's very reactive, and we're a planning board. That means forward-thinking board. But we get so wrapped up in the day-to-day tasks, we don't have a chance to. And I think that's true for everybody. And we'll never get this perfect to
Well,
approve it.
You said something tonight that kind of stunned me when you said the Congress mission will be to execute the master plan. Well, now that's not so high level anymore. Now you're,
I agree with what I said, but the way I see the Congress is saying, okay, there's 52 strategies, let's find the top 3, and let's go start focusing on those and go execute. Let's go focus on derelict buildings, open space, and industrial parks, for example, and get subcommittees working and to implement. Does that make any sense? I certainly don't think the Congress is going to implement or put together plans to implement 52 things at once. We're going to pick a couple.
Would you mind just articulating a bit more the role of the Congress?
The what?
The role of the Congress?
For me, the most critical role of the Congress is to make sure that all the different agencies in town have a common goal. That we can say, that we as a Conservation Commission, we as a FinCom, we as a ZBA, as a Planning Board, as a Board of Selectmen, we buy in to the direction that this master plan is taking us. And this Congress is a forum where all these bodies can get together and nod their head up and down. Because I'll turn to the Wareham Redevelopment Authority members and say, do you buy in 100% to the goals and mission of the Conservation Commission, the open land space, the open space land initiatives, the conservation initiatives? Do you buy into those? And the answer should be yes, I buy into those in the areas of Wareham where we've decided that's what that land should be used for. And I'll turn to the Conservation Commission and say, do you buy into the development of industrial land in the town of Wareham? And the answer should be, yes, I do, in the industrial zone land that we have. I see, we had a situation with the used car lot on Main Street. When Bill was in here, and they talked about the work they had to do with the Conservation Commission on the back line of that lot. You know that developer who bought that lot had to spend $2,000 to have the river edge surveyed per the Conservation Commission? And this is the river edge, which is on the other side of the railroad tracks from his property line. It cost him $2,000 to go do that. And I asked myself, is the Conservation Commission lined up with the master plan? And I say to myself, no, they're not. I think that's a problem that the Congress can go focus on.
What was the issue with having to define the line? That's part of the state regulations and a part of the local regulations.
What do you mean? They wanted the survey updated, is my understanding.
Any work that you do within 200 feet of the riverfront, you need to define where that line is.
And it
Show it on the plan.
It had been defined, and they wanted it updated. And I guess, that's my understanding, Charlie.
Depends on what you mean by updated, I guess.
So I thought it was
I don't know.
foolish. So, and it may have been the law. It may have been.
Well, all I know is that any work that you do within 200 feet of the riverfront, the way it's defined by state statute, if you're going to do activities in that zone, you have to show where the zone is.
So, yeah.
If that's what they meant by updating it, then
Well,
that's
the
what you have
phrase
to
I
do.
was told is that I guarantee you that the markers that were there are within 1.5 feet of the markers that we have now. So, and
You may be right, and I would argue the same thing with you if there were ways to define it and we knew that there weren't any changes. But just when you go through a process like what they went through to put used car lots in there and want to show cars within so many feet of the riverfront, you have to show it, whether it's updated or not.
And the fact that you have a dam between you and the river's edge is,
Doesn't matter.
I know, but that's silly. You got a barrier there. But that's the way it reads.
So to your point, Emmanuel, I understand your hesitancy. I've distributed to everybody a couple of weeks ago something that's 99.9% of what I have right now. Every time I read it, I see a typo and I fix it. Do I need to have it printed out?
Well, I mean, Ken should do it. I mean, the town, not you, the town should print it out and give it to us.
Well, I mean, part of climate change in me is I'm a tree hugger. So I hate printing unless I have to. So, but you know, we can. We printed out I got
I'm not a
the.
tree hugger, I can print it for you if you want.
But I want to get. Here's what I really want to walk away with tonight. I want to walk away with a timeline that says we're going to approve it. We're going to have a vote on it at least by the next meeting. I'd like to have a vote tonight in the worst way, but I'd be happy with a vote by the next meeting. I'll I'll get Ken to print it and I'll drive it to your house, Emmanuel.
I'm being sincere when I say to do justice to your work, I need to read it.
And I appreciate that very
okay?
much.
I'm being sincere.
I appreciate it, and I totally get it. I totally get it.
And I'm tempted to apologize for not having read it. I can't, I've been too busy,
No,
you know? And it's not a fun document to, you know, you take it to bed and you fall asleep, so.
It's riveting.
But no, you get my point.
so, how about this? How about, for those of you that want a hard copy, I will see that we get a hard copy to you this week. And we put on the agenda for sure at our next meeting a vote. All we need is a majority vote to pass this, and I don't get to vote. So, is that fair?
Why don't you get to vote?
Pardon me?
Why don't you get to vote?
I don't think I get to vote, do
Don't
I?
give him any ideas, George. Let it lie.
That would be good.
Yeah, that sounds good, Richard.
I'm gonna hold you to it.
You're gonna get us a hard copy by the
I want to
next
read,
week?
I want to read my comment about encourage the use of existing buildings. I know that contrary to the demolition squad, but
Cut all the trees.
okay, you good with that?
I'm good.
Thank you. Where are we with the Mather definitive subdivision?
We have a plan to endorse. This was approved. We have a plan and a covenant to execute.
Has this been filed? Can't until we endorse it, right?
Right.
What is this covenant?
Does this subdivision, does this predate me here?
No, it doesn't. This was the single lot subdivision off of Oak Street.
That's not the Mylar, is it? Is that a Mylar?
Mylar's on top.
Magic pen?
Can I have to
You have
make
the
comment?
date of, you have the date of the approval?
Can I have to make comment before I forget? I think your Band-Aid is quite becoming.
Oh, you like it?
Is it Hello
I
Kitty?
was showing my grandson
I
how
was
to
gonna
use
say
a multi-tool. And slice my finger.
Oh. Showed him the thing not to do, huh?
Wait, what are we signing?
Yeah, you learned a lesson there.
It's Mather subdivision. Maybe that's the one off of Oak Street.
If you sign it, I'll sign it.
Okay, we share a cell.
What do you mean, they don't give us enough room, you know?
What is it?
I don't have the date.
What do you got on your Band-Aid?
Oh, Band-Aid. One of the cars.
Yeah, it is one of the things. That might have been read at some point. You want a majority on this?
I think your signature covers it with the,
Did we find a date of approval?
no, I'll have to, unless it's,
Oh, this is 9. What did I put, 6? One copy, you know?
One copy's.
Make it 2, please, in case I have to ask for one.
Make it disappear?
Is that one of the changes that you made, Charlie? 1 and 2 in that document?
Just one?
No, I'm just asking for one, so when I come in to find one for inspections, I know I've got a signed copy.
I'll have to get a print made because we only have one copy of it in this package. While we're sitting around here, the next part is a staff report. I just wanted to, there's a couple of things I wanted to go over with the board. Littleton Drive is a property of about 13 acres off of Swift Beach Road. The town meeting turned over to the redevelopment authority to develop senior affordable housing on. One of the issues with that is that there was a subdivision back in the 70s. Although the file shows that the planning board attempted to rescind the subdivision, it was never filed on the land records, the rescission. So we'll probably be back when we get a survey to go through rescission with the planning board.
When you have a definitive plan, why don't you just do it at that point?
Whether that could be a possibility, it may not be subdivided again, though.
I think aren't you just talking about coming back to rescind that plan, so now it's just one big lump again, as opposed to what was done back in the 70s?
That's correct. It would be to,
Sorry.
it would be to restore the property to a single parcel without right-of-ways running through it.
Mm-hmm. I just, from it could be done when you have your finished plan to bring in, right?
Could be that we
Save
turn it
your
over
tri-
to
Save
the,
your trip. I know how much you like coming here.
it could be that we turn it over to the developer that gets chosen for that purpose. Next is the new firm maps, the flood insurance rate maps. We're going to be receiving a notice from the federal government this Thursday that new maps have been gone through the review process and public comment process and are ready for adoption. And it's going to require that we pass an amendment to the floodplain overlay district, to identify those maps, those panels on the, in the zoning bylaw. And that would be for this town meeting, since the panels would become active as of June 30th of this year, of this next year.
How could the public have comment when we haven't seen them or had them in our little hands yet? How could they have a public comment period when nobody's known about them?
I was surprised at that as well, too, but they claim that.
Would they ask people in Alaska if they like the maps? You know, we went through this before, you know. They show up January and say, here, you got to approve these, and nobody even knows what's in them. And the towns that made out the best are the ones that didn't approve them, so,
So let's not approve.
well, let's see what they are, you know.
Ken, who
Like-
prepares these? Who
The
prepares these?
flood insurance rate maps are done under the sponsorship or the organization of the FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. And they use contractors for the purpose of doing the analysis and making the plan changes.
They did hold public hearings when they changed those before. I imagine.
after the fact.
I'm trying to remember the name of the engineering firm that was involved in it, though, because there was opportunities for comments in the town hall, and they made
Well-
changes to those plans.
What happened, they handed it to us in January and said, here, you gotta approve these at town meeting. And there was a real short window. And said, isn't somebody gonna come down and explain these? And, oh no, we don't have time for that. And then about 3 weeks later, they said, oh, we're coming to explain the maps. So we did have a meeting one night at town hall.
Maybe we could ask them to do that again.
Well, I would hope so, before they asked
As I
us.
remember it, there were places where they had flood zones where it was 40 feet in the air.
Well, and then, within the next year, they had to revise the maps, because there was problems with them.
Yep.
And they did that over to Old Rochester, and that was ugly, that meeting. A lot of people were putting it in the flood zone that hadn't even got their feet wet.
So we'll be on the alert for those maps when they come in.
Do you know which ones are in question? Do you have a list?
No, I don't know what panels, they
Yeah.
haven't been identified as yet. Cahoon Street and Bay Point Drive. Want to schedule an information session sometime in January when Stone Street has some plans ready. I think I've already gone through the concept with you that they're talking about changing the right-of-ways around Cahoon and Bay Point Drive and Bay Point Drive Extension. And this would be something that's proposed by Stone Street and will be reviewed. And essentially, if it comes to fruition, the process is going to be like the opposite of accepting a town street. It'll be removing a town street from our maps. So you'd have to lay out the plan, you'll have to get the title search done, and provide the basis for changing the plan and having it brought before town meeting and the selectmen.
Does the planning board have any legal responsibility or authority on this?
Yeah, I believe so, because the process of laying out the way takes the planning board comment. Just look at the policy of the selectmen on the road acceptance, and you get an idea of what's in reverse, what would be necessary to accommodate the removal of that right of way. The abandonment of that right of way. And lastly, on my list of issues, I wanted to talk about zoning bylaw amendments, because we're going to be coming up to town meeting pretty quickly in the spring. And we have, as we know, immediately on the list, a definition that's been worked on very hard by a planning board member for duplexes.
Can I hand out something on that?
Sure.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry. No problem. One of our last meetings, I suggested a adjustment to section 340.4, and for two-family dwelling, and what you're reading shows the recommended edits. So when complete, it would read a building containing 2 dwelling units sharing a common demising wall constructed on a single lot, period, also known as a duplex. Then in response to Richard's great question, what about 3 and 4 and so on? So I've gone to the 3 and 4 family dwelling definition, and you can see where I've added that each unit. Well, I'll read it. Well, you can read it. God, you got it right there. You can see the additions. And then for 5 or more family dwellings, units or structures, the same thing, each unit sharing a common demising wall with its neighbors. The first page is the first option. When I was rereading it over and over again, for 3 to 4 and 5 or more units, the buildings, what about if they're one on top of the other? So on the next page, for your consideration, we could say, sharing a common demising wall or floor ceiling. In other words, if the units are piled on top of, on
What
top of,
What is different between this and what happened,
then what?
than what took place?
Is this, you have to have a common wall that separates the two units, not a
Oh.
breezeway.
Not a breezeway.
But where they are connected is a common wall.
It's not a wall, though.
That's not a wall, it was a fence. A demising, no, this is specifically a demising wall.
Which means,
Separates the two. The wall,
One wall that separates two.
I know what you're trying to accomplish, but attaching two buildings together, how does this
That's how we got in trouble in the
differentiate
first
this
place.
from this with with the structure in between?
they don't have a common demising wall.
Right. You've got two walls, two exterior walls attached with a breezeway as opposed to one wall
One wall for the two.
that separates the two living spaces.
Okay. just so-
You think that
'cause-
that's not clear?
Well, I just
I
know
understand.
that if this was in place, he would
Common.
say, that building is touching this one here, it's common.
No, it says a common, sharing a common demising wall. It can't be here and there, they're not sharing a wall. Help!
Is it the same as a party wall?
Sure. You can call it party wall? I'm not sure what you call it.
I think one of the terms you might describe is what demising means.
Yeah, I thought it was common knowledge. Okay.
Common knowledge to architects and designers, but not necessarily to lay folk.
Thank you. What do you think party wall would be
I'm just asking if it's the same thing. I've always thought a party wall was if you had two apartments in a building, it was the common wall between them.
yeah,
That is known as a party wall.
yeah.
The what?
Party, P-A-R-T-Y.
I think demising is the correct term because it is within the building code, but I think what you have to do is describe it, that it could be just like a party wall.
You can put that in,
Can you put in parentheses, party wall? So do it twice.
Something like that.
Sure.
I just know that particular application, he would say, yeah, it's a common wall. This house with all this breezeway, and this house, it's a common wall.
I think you'd have a hard time winning that particular
I wouldn't have
argument.
passed it the first time, so wouldn't have got by me the...
That's one thing, thank you for that. But what do you think about the thought of accounting also, if we don't account for them being on top of each other, then there's no demising wall.
It's hard to squeeze a breezeway between them.
Yeah, but there's no demising wall. So I offer the two options for you and welcome your feedback. But I think we should do it for sure and take it to town meeting, however you decide to edit it.
I agree. I think anything that we can do to stop from what happened, from happening again is a good thing.
Yeah, I was in a condo complex a couple of weeks ago, and I went up in the attic, because that's where the mechanicals were, and they had a cement block firewall between the units,
Oh, up in the
that's
attic?
code, I believe.
all the way to the peak.
Yep.
I believe that's
But they
code.
punched big holes in it to run the ductwork.
Did you seal them around the duct?
No, there were big holes where the duct went through. So obviously, those were added after inspection, I would think.
I know the fire laws up in Chicago, they prevent a lot of stuff like that. Electrical conduit going from
Oh, yeah.
one wall to the other.
Well, now you have to put
So
that
Ken, will
fireproof
Ken,
foam
will you
around.
take care
You
of?
got Romex coming through the floor, you gotta put that fireproof foam
And
around.
then,
Your boxes and
can
all
I
that.
ask
they
a
call it
question
Chicago
about
style.
Charlie's edits
Use a
on
file track right down through the
the,
tube, like a blow for it, don't blow to it.
your good work?
I've got revised things here, and I can explain the 2 or 3 changes here when the appropriate time comes.
Well, if I can go over some more zoning, because town meeting warrant closing will come up pretty fast. There were a couple of things left over from previous town meetings when we were preparing that we never finished. There were a couple that Manuel had recommended, which were changes in site plan review and design guidelines. There was a one on signs, the sign section, it's Article 11 in the zoning bylaw, and going through and correcting that for the purpose of meeting the Supreme Court case decision that said we can't have any content restrictive regulations. And there was a request for transfer of development rights bank, a TDR bank, for the purpose of trying to encourage more use of the transfer of development rights bylaw. And the state has asked that on a regular basis in the legislation for us to consider accessory apartments.
To consider what?
Accessory apartments bylaw
What that means.
means an in-law unit.
But when you call it an accessory apartment, it's no longer restricted to a family
Family,
member.
it can be rented.
Right, that's why I call it
You-
accessory.
You can have a room over the garage, you could turn your house into a duplex, to make that, make that an easier process.
So the state has asked us to acknowledge that situation in our laws? That's what you're saying?
In draft legislation, none of it is actually passed as yet, but
At the state level?
at the state level, it's being threatened in most of the legislation, change in chapter 40A.
And then if it passes, we have to do this?
That would be the result of the legislation as it's proposed.
And the laws that we could pass could say we don't allow them? Would that satisfy what they?
We don't allow them now because we don't have it in our regulations.
But that's a back door to changing a single-family residence zone to two-family. It's a back door. We should fight it.
Okay. Any of the other ones of interest to take forward in Springtown meeting? Or any other articles of, that you would recommend that we consider?
But the last one that you brought up, what is its current status? Just as an advisory to us? From
The
the state?
accessory apartments? Just advisory, yes.
Can we say thank you, no thank you?
Yes, we can.
You all agree?
I got no problem with it.
I have seen instances where these have been created for like an in-law apartment or something like that, and then that use ceases to be necessary. Would you support a conversion of something like that?
No,
No, it's a back door to changing the zoning.
because everybody and their brother's gonna be coming in. My mother-in-law's moving in, I'm building an accessory apartment. Oh, she just went to Florida, so it's up for rent.
Yep.
And we got enough slime balls in this town. They'll capitalize on it. Remember the olden days, George, when they had garages converted into summer cottages? Swiss Beach, Onset. You know, we're going backwards. No.
All right, so that's off the
I can
list.
think of instances where having that rental income available may make the difference between somebody being able to stay in their house. That's,
No. The way it is now, when you say, is for a family member or whatever, it's for a hardship. You're not you might not be charging them rent. That's fine, but it's a family member. Soon you get away from that, oh geez, I'm a hardship, I need a couple of extra $1,000 a month, my garage becomes an apartment. Man, you like a nice apartment for rent, you know, ocean view or whatever. No, I think that's opening up a can of worms, we're going backwards.
No, I can see where it
You know,
could go very
We're still
badly
cleaning up
because,
the mess from, 50 years
because it
ago.
would show up on the 5,000 square foot lot.
And like I said, we got enough creative minds in this town, they'll take it to the advantage, man. I mean, you might as well shut off the lights and go home. They're gonna take over.
And why does the state get involved in these things?
The state enables us to have local zoning, and in doing so, they require certain conditions for that local zoning.
So they're not mandating that we allow it, they just mandate that we address it.
There is a push on to generate more housing units.
Yeah, no, I know what
And
I
they're
know what the
looking-
purpose is,
they're
but
looking
I agree with Michael. I think it would
Do they-
be
do they
taken
count?
advantage of rather quickly.
Right, 40B didn't work. You know, because that's a moving target, that number, you never can, keep that number down to, because you build 20 units, you get 2 units. That number is going all the time, it's getting bigger and bigger. It's a sliding scale. You know, some guys are being very creative up there. I think we should say no right up front.
Yep.
That's the way I feel anyway, that's my opinion.
I mean, I created an in-law suite for my wife's parents when we lived in Marston's Mills. And when the time came that they passed and I had too much house, I just sold my house, moved on.
And what happened to the
Well-
next person that moved in there? Did they keep it as a,
They had an elderly parent that,
okay.
I mean, the house fit their needs.
Now, if I was a young first-time buyer, I might be interested in buying that because I can supplement my mortgage by renting out that portion, like I said. I think it sets up a bad situation, because I remember when I was a kid, we went to Onset, every garage beside everybody's house became a summer cottage, and now they're coming 20 years later. Oh, that's been existing since, a certain date. All of a sudden, it's a house, no driveway, no front yard, no nothing, just side to side, nah.
And plus the single-family requirement is that, the single-family structure requirement is that even if you have an in-law, it has to be family, it has to be blood-related or by marriage. So, but it will definitely be abused if the in-law dies, or who's going to check on to see if you have a blood relation? I think I
I've
would
got cousins
suggest.
all over the place,
You can live here, but we gotta get married.
Yeah.
Are you interested in having a meeting on the 23rd, which is the fourth Monday in this
Christmas.
December?
23rd
23rd
of
of
this month? No.
Who's supplying the eggnog, Bob? You supplying the eggnog?
That won't come up.
Yeah. I'm committed. I won't be able to attend if we do have a meeting.
When's the deadline for submitting articles?
Probably February, beginning of February.
When is our next meeting?
January 5th.
Right now, it's going to be January 13th.
I gotta wait 5 weeks to get the master plan vote?
You should have thought that through before you offered it up.
I thought we had a meeting on the 23rd.
Read through a couple more times. You'll bring that time up. We'll go quick.
Wait, no. We're doing a telephone vote, all right?
From Greece.
From Greece, right? You want to pay for my phone bill? It's getting expensive.
You guys are killing
We'll
me.
give you a burner phone when you go over there.
I mentioned it to Ken, one of the remedies for the A&R on Ancient Way is to create a local bylaw that says all A&Rs must be on a public way or a way showed on a plan, period. There's one way to resolve the issue.
I've got something written here in rules and regulations if you want to look at them.
That was the language that I had read in that document on A&Rs, but would you,
You have I've got just the changes that I felt needed to be discussed. Everything else, I changed to black and took out all of the red and everything else. So, with
I
your
didn't-
permission, I'll pass them out.
I didn't have any reds on mine. Stop.
Have you still got one, Ken?
No, I don't. Thanks.
There were just 3 or 4 minor things, not minor, but things that I just needed to put. So whether I want to keep them or if I change the language appropriately. And the first one is at the bottom of the first page, under C. That was the one where we were conveying all sorts of stuff to the town by easements and water mains and all that sort of stuff. What I did was I took out all reference to water mains in that first paragraph, and I simply said the developer may execute an instrument transferring to the town valid, blah, blah, blah. I kept all that same language except striking out anything to do with the water department. I kept the next paragraph. And then at the top of the next page, it says, such transfer shall be valid only if authorized by appropriate town meeting action to accept said transfer of facilities or systems. Generally, that's what has to be done. In the next paragraph, I put in there, water mains shall not be conveyed to the town, but may be conveyed to the applicable water district, et cetera. So that's where any reference to water mains and hydrants, appurtenances and everything would come in. So I took all references out to the water mains and so forth in that, which was an issue because it said it had to be conveyed to the town, which we all agreed is not the case, okay? That's the first change. The second change is on page 3, and this would be under definitions and the application. I'm sorry, it's on page 5. It's on page 5 at the top. This is where there was a question about when do plans get filed, especially an A&R. I added at the end, once the application is considered complete by the planning board staff, it shall be placed on the next available planning board agenda, filed with the board. Following the filing of the plan with the board staff shall then file 1 copy of the application with the town clerk bearing the plan board stamp or receipt containing the date and time of filing. This is what we used to do. 2 copies of the application would come in here at the time the plan was submitted. Remember, one would get stamped, George, you would keep one, give one back to the applicant in that case, and then he would run down to the town clerk the next day to get it filed. That would start the time periods, and there would be no question
The
as to when.
3-part form?
Yeah, so there was no question about somebody submitting a plan and then 3 weeks later saying, oh, the time has run out. We got a plan by constructive approval. Down in item 11, under plan contents, I just wanted you to look that over and see if you want to keep that. It's a lot of stuff to put on an approval not required plan. And I'm not sure whether it's necessary, but that's up to the board. If you want to keep it, we'll just keep it. I have no problem there.
Where are you exactly again,
This would
Charlie?
be the item number 11, I believe it is, on page 5.
Okay.
It's that whole big paragraph. You don't normally ask for a topographic plan. We know that there are slopes in some places where exceed 15%, but so what? If it's an A&R plan, you're only concerned with area and frontage, right? If it's got steep slopes, it's got steep slopes.
Well, that's how we were gonna get the frontage. We're gonna make it steeper and measure it
Yeah.
that way.
Surface area.
It's in the regulations now. If you want to keep it, we'll keep it. Nobody's really complained about it. Item 14 is the one that talks about what we put on an A&R plan to define what you need to look at when the way is not either a public way or is not part of an approved subdivision. The way I wrote it was, in the case of streets or ways that are not certified by the town clerk as maintained by the town of Wareham as a public way, that's case number 1, or a way not previously approved under the subdivision control law, comma, the width of the existing travelway, the grade of the travelway, and the details of existing construction shall be noted on the plan. Yes,
Would it help, I'm thinking back to our last experience,
yeah,
to add to what you just read, I'm sorry, the width of the existing traveled way, grade of the traveled way, and details of existing construction, and means and materials of construction. Is that redundant?
okay, can change that.
Yes,
That would make more sense just than, other than details.
Now,
That was my reaction, Charlie. I
That's-
looked at that and I said, I thought that third thing about
Yeah.
the details of construction was
Yeah.
just a little loose.
What was it, means and materials?
So it would be existing construction and means and materials of construction. That way, you were mentioning a core. I mean,
Yeah.
word it any other way, I just want to tie them. I want to.
No, that's a good point. That's fine. I'll change that.
well, the law on that point says at the time of submission.
Not there. It does in a later section. That's correct. That's correct.
What do we do about the case where they make major improvements to the road prior to submission?
In my opinion, that's a violation of the subdivision laws and regulations because they did it on their own without getting approval of the construction or the methods by which it was done, or anything to do with the grading, or anything to do with the width of the road, the depth of material, or anything. In my view, it's a violation of the subdivision control law to do that. But this information would give you the information by which you could then make a determination whether the way it's shown on the plan is adequate. And
The
it doesn't
opinion of the planning board, right?
necessarily mean it's paved, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's 24 feet wide. All they're doing is showing you what the existing conditions are as of that date, and you make a determination if it's enough. If you know that they made improvements within the last 3 months, then they did it under violation of the subdivision control law.
And they should be compelled to supply the easement documents that gives them a right to that roadway.
That would be a different document, probably, but yes, you could ask for that. You do ask for deeds, I think, in other areas, in subdivisions. This is an A&R, don't forget.
But even an A&R, in the particular case we dealt with,
Let's just look.
we could have pressed for those written easements somewhere.
It does talk in the plan cons, it talks about the name of the owner. I don't remember if in the application, it talks about a copy of the deed. You could include that. That's not an unusual thing to include.
One of them, they said definitely. On the other one, they kind of, yeah, it's in there, yeah.
All right, so if we go back a page to item 7, where it talks about the names of the present owners and so forth, do you want to include that a copy of the current deed should be provided? Along with evidence of access?
So I need to back up on you, Charlie.
Okay?
You made the statement, you went and fixed the road 3 months before.
Yep.
He'd be in violation of the subdivision law.
In my view, we would be.
Pardon, and let's apply that to the situation that we just went through.
Yep. The way I would have applied that then, Richard, would have been, I would have said, okay, what is the grade of the road? Because the statute that requires you to make the determination talks about width, grade, and construction. Irrespective of town council saying you can't consider construction. I believe you can, it's in the state statute. But if you don't know what that is, how can you make that determination?
I'm totally with you there.
And if you find that it's not adequate, then you would turn it down on that basis and say you may refile the plan as a subdivision, and we'll go about the process of providing the adequate grade and the adequate construction.
I thought we discussed the concept of anybody applying for an A&R on a road that wasn't a public way,
Yeah,
that we were going to require them for width, grade, and construction, which is what 14 says, right?
right?
But then you threw me when you said if they fixed it before they applied, then they violated the law. That's what really throwing me.
That's a different issue, I think. Because you could say, when was this put down? When was this mix put down? 3 months ago. Okay, under what standards did you put it down? What's the grade of the road?
Well, but in the situation I thought we were talking about, he would have had to provide width, grade, and construction,
That's correct.
regardless if he did it 50, 60, 80 years ago, or he did it
Yep.
3 months ago.
Yep.
Well, given that circumstance, he went in there and improved the road.
Yep.
Do we have any enforcement rights on behalf of the two aggrieved parties?
You were switching
Private,
gears here.
private
Bill.
property rights.
Yeah, I mean, their rights were infringed upon,
Whose rights, please?
the two properties that he crossed.
Okay.
I think that's I think that's a civil matter.
To me, that would be a civil matter, but we don't have any standing as to step in and say, you crossed these people's property, you improved their property without permission or illegally, therefore your improvements don't count, or,
Well, I think that's probably what you're getting at. We're providing documentation with respect to the appropriate access, right? So let me work on that. One of the things you can do is simply provide a copy of the deed and evidence that you have the rights to pass and repass over this particular road.
well, pass and repass is different than improve and
Yeah,
reconstruct.
all right, we could use the word improve, too. That has some legal implications applied to it that you have to be careful of. So I don't want to get into too much detail there.
So, all right, are you good on the deed issue? I want to go back to the Stagecoach Road example. If he had come here initially for an A&R with an improved, let me back up. Assuming that the new regulations that you're proposing are in place,
Yep,
and he had come here for an A&R with an improved road,
yep,
with documentation as to width, grade, and construction. Had a 3-foot core sample. Here's how I did it. That wouldn't have worked in your mind, or this document.
It would have gave us a
All it's
standing
doing
to
is-
deny if the road wasn't
I'm
built to
sorry?
standards.
it's
It-
giving you
Assuming he
the...
had, take the deed issue out of
Yeah.
the way.
That is still a problem in my mind, and I don't have a good answer for you, Richard.
Okay.
In my mind, it's a violation of the subdivision control law to do that.
I
I
just want to make
believe-
sure that that we deal with this situation and we plug all our loopholes.
But I believe that it's a problem in my mind because I'm not sure that the statute doesn't mean the road's got to be existed in a particular condition as of 1951.
Yeah.
Because after 1951, the rules changed.
Exactly, and I think Mr. Bowen has a different opinion than you do on it.
I know.
right.
That's not been resolved in my
And-
mind,
And
at
I don't
least.
want to go write these I want these documents to be tight.
Yep.
I don't want to do another half-assed job on them.
There is some reference to construction being that is the time of approval.
That is correct.
When you have an ancient way, it was never approved. If the road
It
was
means
there prior
it doesn't
to,
say the time of approval, it's the time of submittal.
but there's parts of the bylaw that apply standards of the time the subdivision was approved.
All right, so we can get on, probably he's going to be coming in a minute, but let me go back and look at that a little bit further then. The other things I think we can get through in a second. All right, but I agree, you've got some issues here that need to be completed or cleared up. Down at the bottom of page 10, item number 23. There's a paragraph at the bottom that says, "In calculating runoff and drainage requirements, consideration shall be given to the impact of septic systems on the ability of the soil to absorb additional stormwater." That whole paragraph doesn't make any sense. Because, first of all, you don't put stormwater facilities in an area where you're going to be impacting the Title V system. That's against Title V regulation, for one thing. And Title V flows are so small, they're not going to impact the ability of the stormwater system to function anyway.
What's so small?
A Title V septic system flow is so small, it will not impact the ability of the soil to absorb additional stormwater. It'd be the other way around, if anything. I just don't think that that paragraph needs to be in here at all. And my recommendation is take it out.
I agree.
The next thing I made a change on was on page 11. And I added a number 29 onto that, just calling for a stormwater analysis report with two specific things that go in there, but it has to be done in accordance with the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook. That will give you the same information you've been getting for the last any number of years now. Everybody's doing it by that method anyway, for the most part. But I just added that paragraph in there. The next page is 15. At the top of 15. You remember the last time I passed out a 2-page document that had to do with inspection procedures? Up at the top of the page where it says, "At a minimum, inspections are required at the following times during the construction process." That's the way the original paragraph reads. I added, "and in compliance with the site inspection procedures referenced above." I'm suggesting those procedures be put in the appendix of the regulations, so you've got them. Yeah. In the second inspection, I just made a change. Sometimes we have gravel, sometimes we have reclaimed or recycled asphalt. So I'm just changing the word gravel to road-based materials, just so it's all inclusive. Next page is 20, under curbs. I've changed that paragraph to read, "Curbs of precast concrete, extruded reinforced cement concrete, granite, or Cape Cod berm shall be constructed on both sides of the street in conformance, regardless of street grade, in accordance with these rules and regulations." That means that for any street, whether it's got the minimum percentage of slope or not, put in one of those. Because that helps to contain the surface water in the street, controls what happens adjacent to the street.
How about in cases of low-impact development?
I would leave it in there, and in the cases of low-impact development, it would be something that could be waived. Low-impact development
This
is
is rules and regs, yeah, we
suggested,
can waive.
it's suggested as one of the methods of controlling runoff, but I would suggest you keep it here, and then if somebody is using low-impact development, in appropriate places, you can eliminate the curb and let it run off the side. But it would involve doing other things besides the removal of the curb.
Charlie, you're making common the streetlights in here again.
Excuse me? Michael?
Streetlights. On page 20.
I didn't change streetlights, Michael.
Should we insert something about the streetlight covenant that we,
Or post lamps?
yeah,
Because streetlights, as we know, streetlights, the selectmen kiboshed them quite a while ago.
All right, you want to revisit that particular item?
Yeah.
Okay. Street signs I did change a little bit in accordance with what we talked about before. That's not different. Street trees, The last sentence is shall not be located between the sidewalk and curb or gutter line of the adjacent pavement. That's a request of Dave Menard. It's also a good thing because the root structure tends to underlie the pavement, or it pops the sidewalk if there is one. Under K, the next page of 21, fire alarms,
When you mention street trees,
Yeah.
it says approved by the street tree warden. Does that position even exist anymore?
Wasn't that Billy Ames's
why
father?
don't we change that to say planning board?
That was,
And 12 feet, is that a reasonable expectation? I think the common trees available at 10
We
feet.
probably should say something about the diameter of the tree and not the height.
Yeah.
I thought we referred to calipers.
Yeah, so probably, what do you want to make it, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch?
Say
3
most of
inch?
the plans that we've been seeing
Oh,
say it's
4
2
inch would be
3 inch.
huge.
Give us
Woodpeckers are out.
place is haunted.
Yeah, if I maybe said just 2 to 3 inch caliber,
2 to 3 inch?
you know? I think that's what a lot of the,
I'd have to look, see how big
Yeah, let's check on that.
All right.
a 10-foot tree is.
All right, just put a question mark. All right. The last thing I made was the fire alarms. I simply said, systems should be constructed in accordance with the requirements of the Wareham Fire District or Onset Fire District, as the case may be. If it's not street boxes and wire, then it'll be a telegraphic
wireless
system or something, a wireless system.
2 cans and a string.
Yep. Yeah. And the last thing is, item D, the covenant release. No charge on a inspection fee if the system's complete and satisfactory. Well, you might want to reconsider that in your fee schedule. Everything else has been incorporated the way we talked about it. I'll go back and revisit those 2 or 3 sections, and we'll talk about it again before we actually put it out for a public hearing.
looks good.
Sound all right?
So maybe we can go to public hearing in January?
Sure.
You
It'll be
want
February, if you're.
February, probably February would be better. That way you've got
First meeting we
January to
got.
look over the changes that I make.
When you do a public hearing, will it be? When you do a public hearing, do you have to say
This is fine.
line item by line item what you've changed, or you just throw the document out and say, let's talk about comments?
I've seen it both ways, Richard.
I'm just curious, Charlie, I don't have
Yeah.
a position.
Yeah,
What is this for?
It could get messy, couldn't it?
A&R.
it can get costly
Oh,
to publish the entire document.
Parking.
It can get costly to publish the entire document.
you sign this?
So you might want to just say, we're having a planning board hearing such a date to revise planning board rules and regulations. And then we can spell them out
At the
that
meeting?
time.
I signed it
I think that's great.
in his office to delete it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your
Sure,
time,
Charlie,
Joe.
thank you. Entertain a motion, Judge?
Please.
I think it's time to leave.
Second,
Oh, one thing. It was brought up earlier, a suggestion to start a meeting at 6 o'clock. Is that an issue for people? Is that something you want to do, or?
It's not a problem for me.
I vote yes.
Yeah, sounds good. Does that mean we get out of here early? Do we have a,
still gonna leave it to 11
deadline,
o'clock
no
though?
time after 9?
No time after 9.
Before we adjourn, I just like to ask, we're gonna go to the 13th on that master plan thing. Is there any pressing issue that someone has that we need to talk about or work through between now and then to get a positive vote on this that I'm not aware of? Right now, basically, I'm seeing people nod their heads up and down.
You haven't offered me enough yet.
And you
It's
still-
just an
you-
opportunity
you
to
still
read it one
ignored my
last time, I
comment, so.
Okay,
Sounds good.
all right, thank you.
When would you like to try the new start time?
Start it next
Say,
meeting,
might as well
January.
start it with the next meeting.
In
All-
2020? Next year, we're gonna start at 6 PM start.
All in favor? Aye.